Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The July 5th, 2022 legislative session of the Anne Arundel County Council is called to order. Please silence all electronic devices at this time. Please pause for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Ms. Lacey this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No need to stand up. I think for this, post-July 4th meeting, I decided it would be good to read a bit of a letter from Abigail Adams, the second First Lady, this was before she was First Lady, to her husband, John Adams, written on the 31st of March, 1776. And at this time, they were anticipating documents to be written that they would, that would eventually become the Declaration of Independence, but they didn't know it at that time. But they were corresponding about it. So, Mrs. Adams says, "I long to hear that you have declared an independency. And, by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation." Of course, that was private marital correspondence, but we all get to hear it now, so let's pledge our allegiance to the flag.
Thank you, Ms. Lacey. Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those who wish to testify in any form review the general information on lobbying sheet located on the Ethics website under Forms and Publications. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, please contact the Ethics Commission at 410-222-4413.
Thank you. We will now open our invitation to audience. Madam Secretary, do we have any comments or communications on any subject not included in the printed agenda received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything ahead of time.
Thank you. We didn't have anyone sign up ahead of time to testify, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, you may come down to the table and have a seat. When it is your turn, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 2 minutes. All right, seeing no movement in the audience, the invitation to audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just want to be added as a co-sponsor to 5722.
Thank you. Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also would like to be added as a co-sponsor to 5722.
And Mr. Pruski.
I have 2 requests, adding as a co-sponsor to 5722. And also, I would like to withdraw resolution number 2022. Hopefully, Ms. Lacey was the co-sponsor as well. We worked with the law office on clarifying language, and we're going to reintroduce that. So I just want to request. Thank you.
All right, and seeing no other objections, that will be withdrawn. Thank you. All right, now, may I have a motion to suspend the rules to introduce and vote on resolution number 25-22 out of order?
So moved, Lacey.
Second, Pruski.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. The motion to introduce and vote on resolution number 2522 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read resolution number 25-22.
Resolution number 2522. Resolution appointing legislative counsel to the county council. Whereas Section 302B of the Anne Arundel County Charter and Rule 2-104 of the Rules of Procedure of the County Council authorize the appointment of legislative counsel to the county council. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the County Council of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, that it hereby appoints Matthew J. Bennett as legislative counsel to the county council. And be it further resolved that Matthew J. Bennett will begin his service as legislative counsel to the county council on July 19th, 2022.
Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Ms. Pickard.
I just want to thank all of the Legislative Council applicants, and I was privileged to work with my colleague, Mr. Volke, as we move through the selection process along with our staff to fill this position. As you will note, this resolution is sponsored by the entire council. I have great confidence that Mr. Matthew Bennett will be a fantastic addition, and I'm really thrilled to welcome him as a legislative counsel to the county council. Thank you for being here tonight as well.
Is there any, Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For those of you that don't know, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that work for the council, and we take these, obviously, appointments very seriously. But I want to congratulate again all the applicants, but I think Mr. Bennett's going to be a great fit. Working across the aisle, I think everybody agrees that he's not only qualified, but will do the job that we asked for the council. So I want to congratulate him. Even though I'll be leaving soon, you work with me for a little bit, but there's great people here and staff, and we want to welcome you to Anne Arundel County. Thank you.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo some of the sentiments that Councilwoman Pickard mentioned. It was a pleasure to get to do the interview process of a number of very qualified people, but I think for many of us, Mr. Bennett really stood out as sort of the clear-cut favorite in terms of who we thought might be great for this job. So we have a long list of things for you to work on. Madam Secretary has already told me that I can't put any more on your plate yet, but I have a number of things for you. So looking forward to working with you.
All right, Ms. Fiedler, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I really enjoyed our conversation through the interview process on the phone, and welcome aboard.
All right, seeing no additional lights at this time, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 25-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2522 is adopted.
And I think it's fair to say we all look forward to working with you, and congratulations on your appointment to this role. All right, moving on to the next part of our agenda. May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill or resolution, or minutes constitutes the reading of the whole?
Lacey, so moved.
Is there a second?
Allison Pickard, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of June 21st, 2022.
Minutes of Legislative Session 2022, Legislative Day number 13, June 21st, 2022. The meeting was called to order at 7 p.m. by Ms. Rodvian. The invocation was followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, both led by Ms. Hare.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 21st, 2022?
So moved, Persky.
Second, Volke.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. The minutes of June 21st, 2022 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 7122, an ordinance concerning zoning, critical area overlay, growth allocation. Bill number 7222, an ordinance concerning Bay Ridge Shore Erosion Control District. Bill number 7322, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development and zoning, cluster development. Bill number 7422, an ordinance concerning general provisions, flags on county property. Bill number 7522, an emergency ordinance concerning licenses and registrations, amusements, licensing of coin-operated amusement devices.
Thank you. Madam Secretary. Please read the title of any resolutions to be introduced this evening.
Resolution number 2622, resolution approving estimates of the annual costs of providing health insurance benefits and the employer subsidies used to determine the rates for certain participants under the County Employee and Retiree Health Benefits Program. Resolution number 2722, resolution approving the terms and conditions of the acquisition of real properties in Pasadena, Maryland from Dynasplint Holdings LLC, utilizing funds from the Advanced Land Acquisition Capital Project. Resolution number 2822, resolution endorsing financial assistance from the Maryland Economic Development Assistance Fund to Catalent, Inc. Resolution number 2922, resolution confirming nominations to the Board of Trustees of the Public Library Association of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, Incorporated. Resolution number 3022, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to make the language of the charter gender neutral. Resolution number 3122, resolution in support of women's right to safe, comprehensive reproductive health care and in opposition to the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization.
Thank you. We have a few items on the agenda this evening that need to be reordered. We need to move Bill number 58-22 and Resolution number 17-22 up to the earlier part of our meeting to accommodate our outside bond counsel that is here tonight. I would like to see Resolution number 31-22 moved up as well. May I have a motion to suspend the rules to hear and vote on Bill number 58-22, Resolution number 17-22, and Resolution number 31-22 out of order this evening?
So moved, Lacey.
Second, Councilman Peruski.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Yep.
Ms. Hare.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was a light before.
I just have a question. Which one was Resolution 3122 as I'm looking at it?
I believe that is the Dobbs.
That's correct.
Yes, that's the resolution renouncing the Dobbs decision.
So we're voting on all three of these?
Yes, that was the motion.
May I make a friendly?
Point of order? Not voting on them all at the same time. We're just moving the agenda order to hear those three things first. That's all.
Sure, but the Dobbs resolution typically wouldn't be heard tonight. It would sit for 2 weeks. So my question is from a motion standpoint, is the maker of the motion willing to consider doing two separate motions, a motion on the bill 5822 and the resolution 1722, and a separate motion on resolution 3122?
Point of order.
Go ahead.
This motion isn't even debatable. We just need to vote.
In that case, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Ms. Hare.
Nay.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. The motion to change the order to hear and vote on Bill number 5822 and Resolution number 1722 and vote on Resolution number 3122 out of order this evening has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 58-22.
Bill number 5822, an ordinance concerning the issuance, sale, and delivery of Anne Arundel County, Maryland general obligation bonds and bond anticipation notes.
Thank you. This is an administration bill. So, Mr. Barron, you and your team that I can see are on their way down to the table will have the floor first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members of the council. Thank you for taking this bill out of order. I have with me Ms. McQuaid and Ms. Papalotoni, Mr. Henn, and Ms. Blair Klausmeyer. 5822 is our annual bond bill that the administration brings before the council at the conclusion of the annual budget process. As is the common practice, we do have a few amendments to conform some numbers in the bill to those passed in the FY23 budget, as well as to update some language to account for changes in state law and this council's consideration of Resolution 1722, which will be heard right after this. So we're happy to answer any questions, and I'm going to turn it over to the experts at the table if they have any comments. But I think we're just ready for questions. Unless, Mr. Henn?
Oh.
Mr. Henn does have some comments.
Members of the council, I'm pleased to meet with you again this evening on the county's annual bond authorization ordinance. The bond authorization ordinance is contemplated in the charter subsequent to the adoption of your capital budget. The ordinance before you today is in the customary form that you have approved in recent times. It authorizes general obligation bonds in an amount slightly in excess of $1 billion, subject to the amendment mentioned later. The bonds are secured by the full faith and credit of the county, subject to the tax cap limitations in Section 710D of the charter. The ordinance authorizes refunding bonds and identifies the bonds that may be refunded pursuant to the ordinance, which is essentially all of the tax-supported bonds outstanding of the county. The ordinance specifies the method of sale of your general obligation bonds, consistent with the requirements of your charter and state law. The bonds are required to be sold at competitive sale. The refunding bonds and bond anticipation notes to be discussed momentarily may be sold either at negotiated sale or at competitive sale, again, consistent with the requirements of state law. The ordinance also authorizes bond anticipation notes, which may be issued in anticipation of the issuance of bonds. The dollar amount of the authorized bond anticipation note in this ordinance is $600 million. The bond anticipation notes would also be general obligations of the county, secured in the first instance from the proceeds of the bonds in anticipation of which they are issued. The ordinance also specifies the form of bond. The ordinance, in addition, authorizes the county to undertake indebtedness authorized by the ordinance in the form of loans from the Maryland Water Quality, now, and that's now changed, the Maryland Water Infrastructure Financing Administration, effective July 1. The ordinance repeals last year's annual bond authorization ordinance, subject to a savings clause for outstanding debt of the county, as identified in the schedules to the ordinance. And that, I think that would be my summary of the ordinance for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 58-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, there was nothing received ahead of time.
Thank you. We did not have anyone sign up to testify on this bill ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, you may come up to the table and have a seat. When it is your turn, state your name and address for the record. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Once again, seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 58-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 58-22.
Bill number 5822, an ordinance concerning the issuance, sale, and delivery of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, general obligation bonds and bond anticipation notes.
Thank you. We have 3 amendments tonight. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This amendment decreases the amount of bond authority and corrects certain amounts in the bill to conform to the final capital budget.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt, Allison Pickard.
Is there a second?
Second, Councilman Persky.
Thank you. Mr. Barron, this is an admin amendment. You have the floor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. As I mentioned earlier, this amendment shores up the numbers in 5822 to conform to the bipartisan budget this council passed. We ask you adopt.
All right, seeing no lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment conforms the proposed bill to state legislation effective July 1, 2022, that changes the name of the Maryland Water Quality Financing Administration to Maryland Water Infrastructure Financing Administration.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt, Allison Pickard.
Is there a second?
Second, Councilman Persky.
Thank you. Once again, this is an admin amendment. Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think Madam Administrator hit the nail on the head. It's pretty self-explanatory. We ask that you adopt.
Thank you. Any lights, any questions? Seems relatively straightforward. Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 2 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 3.
Amendment number 3. This amendment clarifies that the reference to debt management policy.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt, Allison Pickard.
Second?
Second, Councilman Persky.
Thank you. And once again, Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just trying to make sure I got the number right. We'll be talking about Resolution 1722 shortly. This is a clarifying amendment to make sure we're all lined up. Ask that you support.
Thank you. All right, seeing no additional lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 3.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 3 has been adopted.
Thank you. Bill number 58-22, as amended, will be heard on Monday, July 18th, 2022. All right. We will move on to resolution number 17-22. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 17-22.
Resolution number 1722, resolution adopting the debt management policy for Anne Arundel County, Maryland.
And once again, an admin resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the same group with me, Ms. McQuaid, Ms. Papalatoni, Ms. Blair Klausmeyer, and we are now joined by our budget officer, Mr. Trumbauer. Resolution 1722 adopts a debt management policy for the county as required under the local government article of the state code. The policy reflects updates to debt affordability measures and clarifies revenue reserve fund calculations are done on a budgetary basis. The updates to the policy are reflected in the budget that was passed by this council in a bipartisan manner. We ask that you approve.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? Oh, Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So just for the record, the Anne Arundel County Debt Management Policy that we received, there was a red line version, and I noted that it's seemingly last time that a council or this document was updated was July 5th, 2016. Just to confirm for the record, that is because state law only requires an update to this document when there is a change. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, but I'm going to defer to Office of Law.
Sorry, Lori Blair Klausmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. That's correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. A question in terms of, I understand changing the number in terms of the ceiling, but what's the rationale on having it automatically increase with the CPI as opposed to coming back to the council at intervals to consider the question specifically when the need potentially to change the number arises.
Turn it over to our expert here, Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chris Trumbauer, Budget Officer. First, let me apologize for my informal summer attire. I was not expecting to be at the meeting when I dressed myself this morning, but luckily, here I am in my budget polo shirt. So good question. And so the council will probably remember that we discussed this a little bit during my Budget Officer remarks to the council when the budget was introduced on April 29th. But what we did, every year, the Budget Office looks at the debt affordability guidelines, and we make sure that projecting out for the remainder of the CIP, we stay within those guidelines. So as part of that exercise this year, we looked at the debt per capita, and as the council knows, that's the only metric that is pegged to an absolute number rather than a percentage or some sort of index. And so what we did is we looked at the last time that was changed, which was referenced in a previous question, that was 2016. It was changed from $2,000 to $3,000. And just kind of on a whim, I asked Huja Hasim, our budget administrator, to look and see what that would be in today's dollars using the January CPI, which is what we use for the property tax cap calculation. So we went back and looked, and in a amazing occurrence of what I would call budget serendipity, it turns out that if we turned that $3,000 number into today's dollars, it was $3,501, which is pretty close to a round number. So we discussed with the budget office and then made a recommendation to the county executive that we change it to $3,500 going forward, because that is essentially the same material amount as it was set in 2016. We're just adjusting to inflation. And then we further suggested that it didn't seem like there was any reason that we should have to do this step every couple years to adjust an absolute dollar amount. Since the CPI in January was used to do the tax cap calculation, we thought that was an appropriate metric to also apply to this. So now what the budget includes and what we adopted as part of the FY23 budget is that new amount, $3,500 per capita, but then going forward it will be indexed to January CPI. So that's a little bit of the rationale. This was presented to the Planning Advisory Board. They adopted it. It was included in the budget, which you all adopted, and that explains how we got here.
May I ask a follow-up?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Was there any thought to, much like we do with other things, saying, okay, attach it to the CPI, but put a max on it? My concern is that obviously in years where, inflation runs quite high, we can end up with some spiraling ceilings on here. And I would personally rather see it come back every couple of years when we need to change it. I would feel much more comfortable if there were at least a limit on how much it could increase automatically. Was there any consideration to that?
So Chris Trumbauer, our budget officer, I mean, this year, with the CPI being 4.5, which was, that's the tax cap amount, and that we kind of consider that would be a high water mark. If we look back, I have the numbers in front of me for the last 7 years, and it's been, 1.37, 2.5, 1.55. It's generally in that neighborhood. So that's certainly something we could look at in the future. We did not include a cap provision in the policy that was adopted in the budget, but if that's something the council is interested in revisiting next year, that's certainly a conversation we'd be willing to have. But I think in reality, that number is what that number is going to be, and so we just didn't think about putting a cap in it for this instance.
Okay.
Ms. Lacey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Hinn, do you have an opinion on the wisdom of this policy, whether for this year or 5 years or however long?
On the specific point at issue here, or,
Yes.
or generally? Yeah. Well, it's fortunately not a legal matter, and I think the question really is what's the sort of prudent management strategy here. I mean, and that's not a legal opinion by its nature, and the idea that there are other constraints going on when the county decides to actually issue debt. I mean, if we look at the bond ordinance, it says $1 billion. Well, the county's not going to issue $1 billion. There's a lot of things going on in terms of vetting with the financial advisor on the statistics like this and how they sit at a particular time that you do a bond issue. And they vet that information with the rating agencies. And so when you finally come to a number, everybody has a good picture of, that the county can afford this and that the market thinks the county can afford that. So these are really sort of outside management bounds. And for what it's worth as a non-legal matter, indexing that to inflation to let that sort of sit there and let people manage the actual incurrence of debt within those parameters would make sense to me. But, that I don't think from a legal point of view, that's not a legal question. So you'd have to make a policy judgment on that.
I wasn't sure you could answer a legal question if I asked it of you, but thank you.
Madam Chair.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Volkey.
Thank you. Same question to you, Ms. McQuaid, that Ms. Lacy just asked. I'm curious your perspective on this from an Office of Finance standpoint.
Karen McQuaid, Office of Finance. I think looking at it, like Mr. Henn said, first of all, we take more into consideration when we do the bond rating agency presentations and all of that. So all these numbers are actually looked at in light of where's the county going, what makes sense. And the bond rating agencies and our financial advisor look at these numbers very closely, and they give us guidance too on those. So I believe doing something, you need to have a metric to do these types of measurements, and I think tying it to CPI makes sense, although, once again, we do a lot of discussion back and forth when we actually look at these before we do the presentations and that of what makes sense. And we're always, our metrics are always very good. So we've always stayed within the metrics, as Mr. Trumbauer has said, so.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. McQuaid, I just want to follow up on that. You're saying you go back and forth before you make your presentation. Are you referring to the budget presentations that get made?
The bond rating agency.
The bond rating agency presentation. So my question is, if this, my concern, and maybe I'm being too cautious, but, and I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out here, but my concern is that if this is increasing every year automatically, and maybe it's 4.5%, maybe it's only 2%, maybe it's 6.5%. I mean, we won't know every year, right? Those numbers then go into our debt affordability automatically in the following year's budget and how much we can spend, and it kind of sets a potential tone for spending potentially more than the county should or can afford in any given year, because it looks like, oh, it's okay, we're within debt affordability. And so my only concern is that if it's not coming back to the council and we're not coming to look at it every couple of years as a check, that makes me somewhat nervous from a policy standpoint. I would rather have that look at it and say, okay, where are we going and how are you guys looking at it? So I guess that's where I'm falling. And so I'm just trying to understand from your perspective, when you say you're going back and forth with this, looking before you issue the bonding, how much weight are you putting on what was just passed in the budget, and how does that impact it?
Well, keep in mind that the budget's being done at the same time that we're doing the rating agencies, and we're doing all of that. So that's all taken into consideration when we're doing the bond rating presentations, when we're doing when they're setting the budget. So I don't know, Chris, do you have anything else to say?
Thank you. Chris Stromeyer, Budget Officer. So Councilmember, I'll point out that, so there's 4 general metrics and guidelines that pertain to debt affordability, right? There's the debt service as the percentage of revenue, which is obviously dynamic because it depends on what the revenue is. There's the debt as the percentage of the full value of the program, which is another percentage. And then there's the debt as a percentage of the personal income, which also is variable. So debt per capita was the only one that's on a fixed amount. So I understand understand your concern, but I would say that the real threshold to dampen or to limit the growth is in those other already indexed metrics. This one was the only one that kind of would stay the same and then go up until you raise it, you stay the same. But all the other three were constantly would be changing, and so the controls that you're looking for, I think, are already built in. This just, the way that the county had been practicing it, it's at a standard amount until you get close to that edge, and then they raise it again. It's kind of like the congressional debt ceiling thing that they get in a fight about every once in a while. So I don't think that this, again, materially, this policy change doesn't materially change what the county would be enabled or unable to do. What it does, I think, is it matches the other affordability ratios in that now that they are dynamic instead of absolute.
Okay, that's helpful. That's very helpful. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further lights at this time, we will now open the public hearing on resolution number 17-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, there was nothing received ahead of time.
Thank you. We did not have anyone sign up ahead of time to testify at our meeting, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, you may come up to the table at this time. Once again, seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on resolution number 17-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 17-22.
Resolution number 1722, resolution adopting the debt management policy for Anne Arundel County, Maryland.
Any further discussion? Seeing no lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 17-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 1722 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 31-22.
Resolution number 3122, resolution in support of women's right to safe, comprehensive reproductive health care and in opposition to the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization.
Thank you. This is my resolution, and even though we might be saying, why is a Supreme Court decision something a local county council might address, the reality is the impacts of this decision will be felt very locally. They'll be felt across the state by women here and in our neighboring states. So I felt it was very important that we address this issue, and a number of my colleagues, I believe, agreed. So I'd like to actually read the whole resolution because there are some very specific asks in the resolution. Resolution in support of women's right to safe, comprehensive reproductive health care and in opposition to overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. Whereas on June 24, 2022, the Supreme Court of the United States issued its decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, holding that the United States Constitution does not confer a right to abortion and overruling its 1973 decision in Roe v. Wade, and whereas comprehensive abortion care is included in the list of essential health care services published by the World Health Organization in 2020, and whereas, according to the World Health Organization, a lack of access to safe, affordable, timely, and respectful abortion care poses serious risks to women's physical and mental health, whereas women should be able to consult with their doctor, family, and faith about personal private medical decisions, and whereas states enacted twice as many anti-choice laws in 2011 as they did in the previous year, including laws that force women to choose abortion care, to undergo forced ultrasound procedures against their will, even if their doctors do not recommend one. Whereas 8 states since 2021 have enacted laws that ban abortion at 20 weeks, regardless of the woman's situation, without exceptions to protect her health. Whereas in 2011, the United States House of Representatives voted to defund Title X, the only federal program exclusively dedicated to family planning and reproductive health care. and in 2017 voted to defund Planned Parenthood, jeopardizing access to birth control, cancer screenings, and other basic health care for millions of Americans. Whereas reproductive health care and the overwhelming majority of services provided by health centers like Planned Parenthood are basic health care for women, including cancer screenings and breast exams. Whereas for many women with limited incomes, health clinics are their point of entry into the healthcare system and their ongoing source of primary care services. Whereas these programs are essential to reducing rates of unintended pregnancy and preventing the increase of the number of fatalities among women with cervical and breast cancers who are not diagnosed until the cancers are in late stages. Whereas when clinics close and healthcare services disappear in states with laws restricting the right to choose, individuals with low incomes and Black, Indigenous, and people of color or BIPOC are disproportionately impacted, restricting access to abortion care. And whereas when these services disappear, more women are likely to delay or forego treatment for diseases that will ultimately imperil their lives and lead to highly expensive Medicaid and Medicare bills borne by taxpayers. And whereas the Harvard School of Public Health reports that restricting abortions access increases negative health outcomes and does not result in fewer abortions, but compels individuals to risk their health and their lives by seeking unsafe abortions. And whereas a 2021 research article published by Duke University Press estimated that banning abortions in the United States would lead to a 21% increase in the number of pregnancy-related deaths overall, and a 33% increase in pregnancy-related deaths among Black women, now therefore be it resolved by the County Council of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, that it hereby supports women's right to safe, comprehensive reproductive health care and opposes any effort to deprive women of their right to reproductive freedom or the right to bodily autonomy. And be it further resolved that it supports and urges Congress and the state of Maryland to pursue laws and agendas that reaffirm fundamental rights and improve women's access to safe and comprehensive reproductive health care. And be it further resolved that it supports and urges the state of Maryland to pursue an amendment to the Maryland Constitution that solidifies the right to abortion care in Maryland. And be it further resolved that it urges the governor of Maryland to release the $3.5 million designated by the state for training new abortion care providers as soon as they become available on July 1st, which actually they now are available as it is July 5th, particularly in light of the anticipated increase in women from other states seeking services in Maryland. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the County Executive Stuart Pittman, Maryland Governor Lawrence J. Hogan Jr., Senator Bill Ferguson, President of the Senate, Maryland Senate, Delegate Adrian A. Jones, House Speaker, Maryland House of Delegates, U.S. Senators Benjamin L. Cardin and Christopher Van Hollen Jr., U.S. Representatives C.A. Dutch Rupersberger III, John P. Sarbanes, Anthony G. Brown, and Steny H. Hoyer. So obviously there's a lot of things to unpack there, but one of the reasons that I was so intent on bringing this resolution was because of the warnings and the experiences that I had learned about from women who had experienced life before Roe versus Wade and knew what that meant to older generations of women and who experienced or knew women who experienced having to have underground abortions or having a difficult time to access abortion care. Even though it's only been like a week and a half? What's the date? It was the 24th of June, and today's the 5th. So, we're looking at maybe 10 days, 11 days. And we've already heard of situations. I know a particular one that's made the news widely is a young girl, a 10-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted and became pregnant in Ohio, is unable to access any sort of abortion care, and the family is now seeking help from other states. I read this afternoon about hospitals in Missouri where they're treating patients who have ectopic pregnancies, meaning the egg did not properly implant in the uterus, uterus, and the pregnancy will not be viable, and it can endanger the woman's life ultimately. And their attorneys are basically saying in order to be in compliance with the law, they have to wait until the woman's life is, on the edge of ending, in very serious danger. So we're already seeing the terrible outcomes of the Supreme Court decision, and therefore I think it's very important that locally we make a statement to push back and to say that we are going to make sure that a 10-year-old girl that's sexually assaulted can have access to abortion care, that a woman with an ectopic pregnancy doesn't have to wait until she's on her deathbed before she can receive abortion care, and that for all kinds of reasons that are personal and private, women can receive the reproductive health care services that they wish to receive. And I see lots of lights, and I don't know which order they came in. Does anyone know who was first?
I was.
Mr. Volkey.
All right, Mr. Volkey.
Just a quick point of, I guess it's information or clarification. When you were reading your resolution on line 25, you said, whereas 8 states since 2021 have enacted laws that ban abortion at 20 weeks, but the resolution itself says since 2010. Is it intended to say 2010 or 2021? I wasn't clear on that. It's page 1, line 25.
I have 2021. I'm sorry, page 1. Wait a second, am I on the right? No, I'm on the wrong page. 8 states since 2010.
Okay, 2010. Okay,
2010. My apologies if I read the wrong number.
No worries, thanks.
And who is next? I'll just go down the order. Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I had 2 questions. One is to the procedure, and I'm just going to go back to what I was asking before about the parliamentary procedure. I do want to note that just because a motion is undebatable does not mean that the chair cannot permit a question to be asked about the motion. It says here that the distinction between debate and asking questions or making brief suggestions should be kept clearly in mind, but it does say that the chair may permit a question or an explanation. My question earlier was just, are we permitted from a parliamentary procedure standpoint from doing both of those bills and this resolution in one motion, since the motion is technically different? The motion to hear Bill 5822 and 1722 resolution, which had been previously introduced, is just a motion to hear them out of order. The motion on this one was separate because it's a motion to vote on it tonight and hear it out of order. That was my question before. Regardless, we're talking about it now, but I did want to come back to it since I was not permitted to ask my question earlier. The other question that I had was just some of these things that you cite in here. You mentioned a Duke study and things like that. Trying to look up these things during the last couple of days, I'm not able to replicate all of them. Do you have source documents for some of the claims?
I don't have them at my fingertips, but I can provide them for you.
Okay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. This question is for the Office of Law. When the Supreme Court came down with their decision to give abortion care decisions to the state, was there any language in that decision that also included decisions by county or local jurisdictions?
Lori Blair, Classmar, Deputy County Attorney. I'm going to admit that I have not read the entire decision. It's quite lengthy. I think however, I think the decision was that abortion is left to the states, and it's not a matter of constitutional, it does not rise to the constitutional level of a constitutional right. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I'm not sure, and having not read the decision, I don't know if local jurisdictions are mentioned.
Thank you.
Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for your comments in the resolution. I want to point out, as a matter of fact, in 1992, the voters in Maryland actually voted to allow reproductive right health care, and they may have to do it again. I know there's a concern raised that the current decision maybe is unclear, and of course you said that, but I think the way that certain decisions have come out lately, that this is in question. So I think this is a statement that people are going to make about where you stand on the issue, and I think it's important, and thank you to the chair for bringing it. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So this is, I'm going to piggyback actually on something Mr. Pruski said when referencing the 1992 action of the Maryland General Assembly. keeping that in mind and that the current laws for Maryland are supported by the majority in both chambers of our Maryland State General Assembly, what is the purpose of this resolution at this time?
I would point, as the author, I'll take this question, I would point to the specific asks that we have at the end of the resolution. Probably the most relevant and timely one is the request to the governor to release the $3.5 million to train additional healthcare providers in providing abortion services, but also to ask our state legislature and our federal counterparts to enact laws to basically make sure that this is a protection that women will have at all levels of government. I'm not sure. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Lacey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would add to that more specifically from a time frame perspective. The point of the resolution, as I see it, is also to urge our state to have a special session of the legislature in order to return to the question of putting a constitutional amendment on our ballots in November. They would have to come back and do that pretty soon if that were to happen in time for the November ballot. And I'm just, I guess, going to briefly add that I know that, and I understand that, you know, the law in 1992, the referendum that happened in Maryland, has protected women in Maryland, and since that time, and that's great. But putting this right in our Constitution is a very significant step that I think a lot of people overlooked, in the sense of sort of forgetting that what does our Constitution mean, our state Constitution. So many of our questions are decided at the federal level or considered as a matter of analyzing the federal Constitution, but we, the people of the state of Maryland, have the fundamental power to decide what goes into our state Constitution. And as for including our congressional representatives, my view as far as this resolution is that we women, or anyone with a uterus, persons, ever since June 24th, are now second-class citizens, even though we live in a state that protects our right to abortion, because our fellow women in states that now no longer allow it, or that are forced pregnancy, forced birth states, those women are oppressed, and therefore we are oppressed. Because my rights shouldn't change based on whether I live in Maryland or decide to move to Alabama. It's wrong. And so I'm happy to support this. There's a long road ahead. I'm not disillusioned at all about how far this resolution can impact, every woman in America, but it's a start right here at home.
Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the sponsor for bringing this forward. It is very timely. I want to point out there's a couple whereas clauses that are very important to me, and it's whereas women should be able to consult with their doctor, family, and faith about personal, private, medical decisions. And then, of course, we are asking the governor to release the funds, which was passed this year in the General Assembly in anticipation of the Supreme Court decision. I turned 50. I'm born in 1972. I have a daughter who'll turn 18, and she has less rights today than I did my entire first 50 years of life. But more importantly than that, as Maryland has codified the right to making this decision with their physician, it shouldn't, like some of my colleagues, it shouldn't depend on their state or their zip code or their county or state legislature to tell them what they should do with their body. Body autonomy. What I do with my body doesn't affect anyone else. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I will be voting aye on this resolution tonight.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we will now open the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, in the wrong section. Mr. Barron, does the administration have anything that they would like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The county executive has spoken out on this issue. On behalf of the county executive, I want to thank you for your leadership in bringing this forward. And while this is a statement of the county council, the county executive fully supports.
Thank you. All right, before we vote on this resolution, I just wanted to add one little piece. I don't know that anyone can actually speak this more clearly than the dissenting justices themselves. They're masters at this. So in the dissent from Justices Kagan, Sotomayor, and Breyer, I just want to read a short quote. The majority would allow states to ban abortion from conception onward because it does not think forced childbirth at all implicates a woman's rights to equality and freedom. Today's court, that is, does not think that there is anything of constitutional significance attached to a woman's control of her body and the path of her life. A state can force her to bring a pregnancy to term, even at the steepest personal and familial costs. And they went on to conclude, with sorrow for this court, but more for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. And if there are, Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So this is obviously an emotional topic. I think about it and reflect on my own personal life experience. While it's difficult to talk about, I'll share that I almost lost my own life in a high-risk pregnancy, bringing my third child into this world, a baby born prematurely who almost didn't survive. I never imagined having to prepare a living will as part of my pregnancy, but I did. Excuse me. Directing my medical team on who to save if that moment came. Knowing that decision could leave 3 children without their mother or the loss of our baby. When he was born, my fight for life began as doctors worked to save me. When I was strong enough to meet him, days after his birth, I held his tiny body as he was kept alive, hooked to multiple machines. When we weren't allowed to stroke his skin for weeks, because of the pain it could cause him, his fragile and exposed nerves just under the surface of his thin skin. By the grace of God, we are both here today. This is my story, but there are thousands of other stories that will guide decisions in every state across our country. Discussions that we cannot begin to flesh out in this chamber tonight. When the Supreme Court returned the decision on abortion to states, that did not empower or entitle our county council to any decision-making role in this matter. My abstention this evening reflects my position that this is not a topic for this council, and I respect the boundaries and responsibilities given to each level of government.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Councilwoman Fiedler's comments, and my wife had a similar situation with her pregnancy, bringing our firstborn son into the world, who was born 10 weeks early and spent a lot of time in the NICU. And so I come at this with a lot of sensitivity. But with that being said, without getting into the substance of it and just looking at the law, I have had an opportunity to review the Dobbs decision. I obviously had a chance to read Roe v. Wade when I was in law school and consider that extensively. And I do think that the decision that was made by the court on a legal basis was the correct decision in Dobbs. And I do think that Roe was the wrong decision, and the Dobbs court has corrected that. So with respect to what we're making in terms of a statement on the legality and whether this should be something that falls to the states or not, I do think the Dobbs decision was decided correctly. So with that, I will be voting against this resolution.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. A couple of things. I think this resolution goes quite a bit farther than the Dobbs decision. It discusses quite a bit more than was in the Dobbs decision. If you do go through and you review the Dobbs decision, it's quite clear that essentially that the court is saying courts here should not substitute their social and economic beliefs for the judgment of legislative bodies. That is the purview of the legislative body. Councilwoman Lacey mentioned that the General Assembly should be considering this, and I think that that's exactly the point in the Dobbs case. There are Supreme Court justices on both sides of the aisle who have suggested that Roe was faulty in that respect. I believe Justice Ginsburg has even said that. So for those reasons, recognizing this is a particularly emotional topic, but for those reasons, I'll be voting against this resolution.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Lacey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to just point out in response to that wherever the Supreme Court chooses to ground or not ground a particular constitutional right, I think there's broad general agreement in our society that people should have bodily autonomy, especially when it comes to medical decisions. And so whether or not this court has, in deciding to throw out Roe and all the implications that that's going to bring, whether or not that was a wise thing to do, we can debate it all night. But I think history has shown us that what we really need to do is have a federal constitutional amendment. If the right's not going to be grounded on, say, the 13th Amendment, which prohibits slavery, which forced pregnancy and forced birth, it's not slavery as in historical slavery, but it would be a new slavery for our generation. I know I'm still of reproductive age. Others here are as well. I can't stand that thought. So that is something that, on that issue, whether it's grounded in how our Constitution was written or whether we update it to reflect modern understandings, either way, I think this resolution in urging the governor to release the $3.5 million that are going to help save the lives of women in states who come to Maryland. They're not allowed to get abortions where they live. They come to Maryland to seek medical care. And also to not diminish the access of women in Maryland to abortion care. If you've got more demand, you need more providers. Otherwise, the services available to us in Maryland will be diminished. All of those are good enough reasons for me to pass this resolution, and I know the Supreme Court won't give one single iota of thought to what we think on this. But we're not sending it to them, so thanks.
And before we vote, I would just like to address Ms. Hare's comment, the idea that, the Supreme Court is always capable of sending things back to the state, but they're also capable of recognizing fundamental rights, and they have done that in so many cases. Although, if you've become familiar at all with one of the concurring opinions, some of those other fundamental rights are now being questioned in a way that I think upends the whole idea of freedom on which our Constitution and our nation is based. So, with respect to, the Supreme Court sort of taking a pass and saying, oh, leave it up to the states. Well, they know exactly what they did. There were states that, had these trigger laws ready to go into effect. And those women, and in some cases girls, were going to be very immediately and very negatively impacted. With respect to the local impact, this is very timely and very local. We have, not every county in the state of Maryland even has abortion care services, and we are one of them that does. Although I believe we only have one clinic in the state of Maryland. We already experience demand from patients coming from the eastern shore of Maryland because we're the most easily accessible for most women coming from the eastern shore. But I think now we can anticipate that the clinics that are in central Maryland will, experience increased demand for services from women from other states. We're also the county that has the only international airport in the state of Maryland. And not necessarily will be serving women from overseas, but that I think gives an indication of how accessible Maryland is to other parts of the country. We have, direct flights from just 15, 20 miles up the road to places all over the nation, including many places that now have very strict or total limits on abortion services. So I think the impact will be felt, is already being felt, and will continue to be felt locally. And I feel like it's important to say that we are going to be here and present for women in the state of Maryland, whether they're from Anne Arundel County, the Eastern Shore, or Western counties that may not have easy access, or women in other states who may not have it who may not have access in their home states at all, to keep it safe, because we know abortions will not end simply because states outlaw it. They will simply become much more risky and result in more fatalities of women. And with that, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 31-22.
Ms. Hare.
Nay.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Nay.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Abstain.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and 1 abstention. Resolution number 3122 has been adopted.
Madam Secretary. That
I
count
think
went
there
off.
was a mistake in the count.
It's 4-2-1.
I'm sorry, 4. You're exactly right. Please let me correct the record. 4 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, and 1 abstention. And the result is still resolution number 3122 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 57-22 as amended.
Bill number 5722, an ordinance concerning zoning, nurseries with landscaping and plant sales.
Ms. Hare and Ms. Fiedler, you're the original sponsors of this legislation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. We don't need to go through it all again today. That we have one substantive amendment that we had mentioned at the last meeting we would work on outside of the council chambers, and then one technical amendment. So I'll just save my remarks for them.
Thank you. Mr. Barron, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joining me at the table is our Deputy CAO for Land Use, Ms. Lori Rhodes, Ms. Lynn Miller from OPZ, and Ms. Kelly Kenny from the Office of Law. As the sponsor noted, after the discussion at the last council meeting, we all got together, had a very productive, no pun intended, in the weeds discussion, and I think we all are looking forward to these amendments, and just want to say there's been a lot of good work on this bill, and the amendments coming forward, spoiler, will support. It was good teamwork.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing no lights. All right. At this time, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 57-22 as amended. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
Yes, Madam Chair, we did receive 3 submissions ahead of time through the online testimony tool that all went to the council. It's been included in the summary that is posted online and will be added to the record.
Thank you. We did not have anyone signed up ahead of time to testify at our meeting this evening, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, you may come down to the table at this time. All right, seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 57-22 as amended is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 57-22 as amended.
Bill number 5722, an ordinance concerning zoning, nurseries with landscaping and plant sales.
Thank you. And there are a couple of amendments, as mentioned already. Madam Secretary, please read Amendment number 4.
Amendment number 4. This amendment allows accessory retail or wholesale uses associated with nurseries with landscaping and plant sales on any portion of the lot.
Thank you. Ms. Hare and Ms. Fiedler, and I see Ms. Hare's light. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. So at the last meeting, we had talked about this concept of flexibility for nurseries and how there were kind of different pockets of percentages and requirements on the nurseries, and we had a long protracted discussion about one amendment that moved them all together, but the difficulties with that. So we did get together afterwards, we met, we had a super productive meeting, and we've come up with a very simple amendment that I think will provide the nurseries with a great amount of flexibility while still maintaining the original intent of the bill, which was to move certain items to be part of the principal use of the nursery as opposed to accessory use. So this amendment, we heard quite a bit of testimony about the retail sales and that 1% number and how that 1%, how do you measure the 500 square feet, 501 square feet, and what does that do? And so rather than lumping things together, we have simply allowed the accessory use of these retail sales. And that way, that 1% number is no longer there. This is giving the nurseries that extra flexibility. It keeps the retail sales accessory. So clearly, the predominant use on the property is still going to have to be the plant sales and the items incidental to the plant sales. But it does give them, on the principal side, it maintains that flexibility we had in the original bill with the plants, the mulch, the stone, the fertilizer that are incidental to the plant sales. So I think with this, we have a consensus among everyone. Thank you to Planning and Zoning and the administration for your work on this with us, that this should put the bill in a really great spot for the nurseries that are currently having kind of this weird struggle with trying to work within the code. With that, I would move the amendment.
Is there a second?
Fiedler, second.
Is there any discussion? And Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As was mentioned, we have worked together to come up and as we talked about at the last meeting, we're all trying to get to the same goal, and this amendment is extremely helpful. Ms. Rhodes, do you have anything to add to that?
Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Land Use. I agree with you, Mr. Barron. That 1% provision in the code, I feel, is outdated and arbitrary. This will definitely allow this industry to thrive because businesses are always evolving. And I think, as Councilwoman Hare mentioned, the original intent will remain, but allowing that accessory retail to not be the dominant use will give the businesses more flexibility. And that concludes my comment.
Thank you.
If I didn't say it, we support this amendment.
We support it, definitely.
Fantastic. All right, Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After last meeting's interesting debate and crowd in the audience, it looked like the crowd was watching a tennis match going back and forth between amendments. So I just want to make sure that we've included the stakeholders, and we do think we've come to a consensus. I mean, typically, if we all follow our legislative drafting best practices, we would have collaborated a little better on this bill from the beginning, but I just want to make sure we're getting it right. So I trust Ms. Rhodes, you are good?
Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. Actually, one of the businesses is in the audience. I've been in constant communication with them. Talked to Planning and Zoning. I believe we got this bill as close to being right as possible.
All right. With that, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 4.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 4 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 5.
Amendment number 5. This amendment amends the purpose paragraph to reference a prior change made in the body of the bill and corrects a typographical error referencing the proper code section.
Ms. Hare, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's technical. We're just cleaning it up so that hopefully we can have a final vote on it at the next meeting. And with that, I will move the amendment.
Is there a second?
Fiedler, second.
Thank you. And Mr. Barron, do you have any comments?
Nothing to add. As stated, technical cleanup. Please pass.
All right, sounds good. Seeing no additional lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 5.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 5 has been adopted.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes.
Madam Secretary, would you please add me as a co-sponsor since we are all kumbaya on this bill now? Thank you.
Madam Chair, that means that Bill number 5722 is being sponsored by the entire council.
Oh, well, that bodes well. But it will indeed, Bill number 57-22 as amended will be heard on Monday, July 18th, 2022. All right, and it is looking good for passage. Not that I like to predict what happens here. All right, at this time, let's move on to Bill number 59-22. Madam Secretary, could you please read the title of that bill?
Bill number 5922, an ordinance concerning planning and development master plan for land preservation, parks, and recreation.
All right, this is an administration bill. Mr. Barron, you and your team that are joining you at the table have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron. With me is our Rec and Parks Director, Ms. Lays, Ms. Matthews, and Mr. Brucci, and from Law, Ms. Niederer. 5922 updates the county's land preservation, parks, and recreation plan as required under state law. Updating the plan is a requirement for the county to be eligible for certain program open space funds. The updated plan before you is the result of countless hours of outreach and community engagement. The Department of Parks and Recreations has conducted surveys, held virtual town halls in each council district. I know they've met with you, each of you, numerous times sometimes on the details of this, and they were happy to do it. The draft plan has been widely shared and made available for public comment. Rec and Parks has also met with the Planning Advisory Board, the Recreation Advisory Board, the Citizens Environmental Commission to receive feedback. The plan has also been sent before the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Planning for comment. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lays and her team to give you a little bit more detail on this.
Thanks, Pete. Good evening, Jessica Lays with the Department of Recreation and Parks. Tonight I have with me Erica Matthews, our Deputy Director, who also moonlights as the Capital Construction Chief, as we have not hired that position yet, and Bruce, who is our Program Specialist, who took the lead on the LPPIP process a year and a half ago. That's how long it takes us to get to this seat, which is the final step before we submit to DNR. We're really excited to have Bill 5922 here this evening, which will adopt the 2022 Land Preservation, Park and Recreation Plan, better known as the LPPIP or the LIPRA. I want to thank each of you personally for being involved in this process. It truly takes a team to put together a good plan. Each of you attended your town hall meetings, you rallied up the troops, and you brought us feedback that is very valuable in pulling together this comprehensive plan. As you know, this is very important to the department because it just gives us another tool for which we can use when we are developing property and looking at the needs of Anne Arundel County residents. The plan does fulfill the mandate from the state in order to make us eligible for program open space money. And this is especially important because in the last 5 years, we've been able to leverage over $28 million of state monies to go towards acquiring land and developing that land. As Pete said, this plan has been approved by both our Planning Advisory Board and our Rec Advisory Board. The plan looks at our rec and park system in a holistic way. It evaluates the demands and the needs for our programs and our facilities countywide. It provides us a plan for which the county can meet in 5, 10, 15-year increments. It then becomes our master plan for everything that we do at Recreation and Parks. It covers our parklands and our recreational facilities, our agricultural land preservation, and our natural resources and land conservation. We believe that the plan that we brought forward tonight approaches and addresses all the needs of Anne Arundel County residents. This plan is consistent with both Plan 2040 as well as the recently adopted Green Infrastructure Plan. Again, it's just a planning tool. It does not supersede any development process, nor does it supersede our capital project development process. It just identifies the needs and provides us recommendations on the best way to meet those needs. So with that, we're here to answer any questions questions. Bruce is the expert on the who, what, where, why, and when. So if you have any specific questions, we'll entertain them now.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions yet, but don't assume you're off the hook completely. At this time, we will open the public hearing on Bill number 59-22. Madam Secretary, do we have testimony received from members of the public?
Yes, Madam Chair, there was one submission through the online testimony tool. It went to the entire council. It's included in the summary that is posted online, and it's been added to the record.
Thank you very much. And at this time, we will invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on Bill number 59-22. We do have one person signed up for this bill. So Mr. Lofton, you may come down to the table and have a seat. When you are ready, state your name and address for the record, and your remarks will be limited to 2 minutes.
Is there a clock I can watch? You don't do that anymore?
The timer that we had here
It broke?
actually took a vacation.
Really? Put a new one in the plan.
The temporary one will be right here.
I can't see that. Can you flip it up? Okay, I'll just do my best and I'll ignore you if you stop me. I'm Mike Lofton. Good evening. 50-plus year resident of District 7. Happy. For some pretty gut-wrenching events here tonight. So I'm a member of the Rec Advisory Board, but I'm here tonight as an individual citizen. My remarks are not those of the board. I just want to make that clear. You got one written submission. That was me also. I hope you'll read that because I went into a lot more detail. My view on this is that we're really not serving the public well, and this is the council's opportunity to wade in and examine and make changes. For far too long, the plan has been handled as a check-the-box choice mandated by state law. Instead, it ought to be a once every 5 years opportunity to assess performance of the public functions addressed by the plan and an opportunity to make changes to better serve the public. The public needs, wants, and has paid for facilities and services they're not receiving. The council needs to acknowledge this and take action to fix it. I'm told you must approve the plan tonight or the state funding is at risk. If that's so, I'm not sure why we're having a hearing, then you probably should pass it. But this plan does not fix what is wrong. Please don't ignore this problem. Let me give you a couple quick examples. We've resorted to rationing access to public parks. Rationing may be necessary in an emergency, but it's not a solution. It's not a solution when access is demonstrably inequitable. It's not a solution when those who don't want the public in the public parks can easily corrupt the system. It's not a solution when public facilities are rented to private users that exclude the public from the public parks. In District 7, we're considered equitably treated if we're within 5 miles of a recreation facility. Everywhere else, it's a half mile. Maybe more difficult, more expensive to get closer, but it's a problem, and it shouldn't just be accepted as not a problem. This is the council's promise to the public. This is the action that stems from Plan 2040. This is where you're promised to deliver, and there's some impressive words in your promises, and hopefully I've included those in my written words. But the public's being go stand at a park and listen to the kids in the back seat being turned away. That's ugly. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your remarks. If there's anyone else that would like to come down and testify at this time, please come on down to the table. All right, seeing no additional movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 59-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 59-22.
Bill number 5922, an ordinance concerning planning and development master plan for land preservation, parks, and recreation.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Fiedler and Ms. Hare's light. You get to decide who goes first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So just following up on the testimony we just heard, do we in fact put funding at risk if we do not pass this evening?
Erica Matthews, Deputy Director, Recreation and Parks. The answer is yes. This is mandated. It's one of the requirements for us to get the funding from the state.
Thank you.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Ms. Lays, I just wanted to ask a couple questions following up on testimony and some stuff we've got written here as well. So District 7, 5 miles versus half a mile. District 7, I mean, geographically, it's a large portion of the county. So can you help explain that? Because I struggle with that as well. just that it seems odd that we would use one metric for part of the county and another metric for another part of the county.
So I'm going to defer to Bruce, who can explain to you why we use the maps that we use and how we designate different areas, rural areas to very populated areas like in North County.
And thank you, Madam Director. I'm Bruce Brucci, a program specialist with the Department of Recreation Park. It is quite simply reflective of the area. The state standard is actually the 5-mile catchment area, and we're talking about a GIS, a Geographic Information System model that looks at park locations against population. The statewide number is a 5-mile radius around park and recreation facilities. We are allowed to adjust that for density in urban areas. And an important thing that the State Department of Planning guides us on is to make sure that we're measuring the same thing that the land use policies are. If we were to apply the half-mile standard to some areas of South County, we would artificially, show the need for park facilities within a couple of miles of each other, where the size of some of the farms, we don't have people that close. So there has to be an alignment, and the planners use the different sizes of those catchment areas to fit the plan to the land policies. And that's really what it comes down to.
May I ask? Thank you, Madam Chair. So the whole county is meeting the state standard. We are actually we're setting ourselves for a stricter standard, essentially, in more densely populated areas. We're trying to go above and beyond what the state is requiring.
Well, we are and above what the state is requiring in the more dense areas. We're trying to avoid being forced into building facilities where we don't have people.
Okay.
Ms. Lacey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we get clarification on when is this homework actually due to be turned in finally to the state? Because the bill doesn't expire until September 9th, and we do have a meeting between now and then where we could consider this again.
Erica Matthews, Deputy Director, Recreation and Parks. It's due July 1 is the actual deadline. It's with the state now. This is the last step that we need to have this approved.
Okay. I'll keep my thoughts to myself right now.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I had one other question that was raised via email, this concept of the availability of some of the parkland, and that while we may show parkland in the plan, is it available for folks to go use? I'm not suggesting you give along. I'm just trying to understand, is that something that you all consider maybe for future plans, or is that something you considered in this plan? How are we designating lands that are able to be accessed by the public now versus maybe sometime in the future when we're calculating whether we meet this requirement for the 5-mile radius and all that other stuff?
So your question is sort of twofold. One is an operational question. The LPPRP does not, Erica Matthews, Recreation and Parks. The LPPRP does not address operational efforts. This is truly just a planning tool. What we take into consideration in the plan are, we've determined that there are some needs that we need to address. We may say that we have a property in a certain area that could possibly be used to address it. Again, these are just recommendations or ideas to meet a need.
So the operational plan piece would be where we would look to that kind of availability and accessibility piece of it?
If we were to open up the park and have staff there to manage it, yes. If we were looking at developing a capital project, yes. Again, this is just a planning tool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Any additional questions? All right, seeing none from my colleagues, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number...
Sorry, Madam Chair, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah,
I
go
didn't
ahead.
realize you were actually going to proceed to calling the roll already. We feel like we just started talking
I know,
about this.
well, it's...
So, sorry. May I ask another?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I read Mr. Lofton's comments submitted today, and I do think one of the comments that gave me concern about, thinking about for tonight in particular is understanding better the relationship between the LPPRP and Plan 2040. Because when I looked at the language in the LPPRP describing that relationship, it sounds as though what is in Plan 2040 can be superseded by the LPPRP, as opposed to the LPPRP is underneath Plan 2040 as far as the goals that we've set for for equity, all kinds of lofty goals that we have there in that plan. I'd like to understand, I suppose, legally. I totally get the funding piece, and that matters, but I don't know that I would agree to saying that this plan supersedes Plan 2040 in as much as its content, as far as that goes.
Erica Matthews, Deputy Director, Recreation and Parks. This plan does not supersede Plan 2040. We use this plan in conjunction with Plan 2040. We use it with the Green Infrastructure Plan, and then we'll use it with the region area plans that are getting ready to get started. Again, this is just ideas. What'll happen is we go back to our standard development process where we do feasibility studies. We look at all the needs in an area. We figure out what's the best use of a park. We come down for budget appropriation because we always need the money. So this plan does not automatically say what's in this book is the be-all, end-all. There's still a lot more work that comes after it and a lot more coordination between all the plans.
Mr. Barron, would the administration consider possibly agreeing to a hold on this for until the 18th? I think a potential amendment to just the bill itself, not the plan, but just to the bill, that would add a section that clarifies that the LPPRP does not replace any of the relevant portions of Plan 2040 is something we could consider. I don't see why the state would care since they already have the homework. So
sorry, didn't mean to cut
that's
you off.
okay.
Pete Barron with the administration. Respectfully, I think this plan, a hold is unnecessary. We have, I think, answered those questions, and I also want to turn it over to the Office of Law because there are some nuances with this plan, the stormwater management plan, and one of our other water sewer master plan that I think Office of Law can speak to as it relates to council amendments.
Christine Nieder with the Office of Law. I think, Councilwoman, that you were saying, though, that you were not proposing an amendment to the plan.
Correct.
So this would be an amendment to the actual bill itself.
Correct.
Which I think is different than Mr.
So on that point, we still think we're ready to go tonight. I don't think that any amendment to this bill is necessary.
Thank you.
Any further questions at this time? All right. Oh, Ms. Pickard, are you just ready to vote?
I am ready to vote, but I would also like to extend my, I'm very grateful for the time that y'all have spent with me and my constituents on our town hall and incorporating some of those ideas into the plan and really looking at the inequities that exist in District 2 and the north and west part of the county. This plan is just this one tool, but there'll be a lot of loud voices, including mine, as we move forward to make sure the residents of District 2 have adequate recreational facilities. So thank you for always taking my call.
And actually, before we call on the vote, I'll make a similar comment. There have definitely been some very heated debates about different parks topics in District 6 and, well, now the new part of District 6, formerly District 4, over the past several years. And I've always appreciated your willingness to respond and speak directly to constituents or speak to me in order that I can speak accurately to constituents. So thank you for that as well. Now seeing no lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 59-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 5922 has been passed.
Thank you. At this time, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 60-22.
Bill number 6022, an ordinance concerning branches of government orphans court compensation.
Mr. Barron, this is another administration bill. You have the floor along with your team.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have our Personnel Director, Ms. Podolsky, and Ms. Lori Blair-Klausmeyer, our expert from the Office of Law. Bill 60-22 adjusts the compensation for orphans courts judges in the county. Sorry, I've lost the ability to speak all of a sudden. The adjustments would bring the salaries of the judges and the chief judges for the court up to $60,250 and $65,250, respectively, phased in over the course of 4 years. The changes would make compensation more in line with the workload our judges are dealing with every day and more in line with similarly sized jurisdictions in the state. We ask that you pass this bill tonight. And we're here for any questions, as always.
Thank you. I will just jump in and make a comment to express my appreciation to the administration because, as you know, Mr. Barron, I have urged the administration for a good time to bring forward this bill. I believe strongly that people should be paid appropriately for their work and for their time. And as you said, I think this brings us in line, at least closer in line to the workload that our orphans courts judges actually have on their plates. I guess technically they're not full-time, but as a person myself who's technically not full-time, I know how that goes. So at this time,
Madam Chair, if I just may, I did forget to make one important clarification for the record. Our judges are elected. And there's a prohibition state, I think it's in the state constitution, of changing salaries of an elected official during their term. So this will not start until the next term. So there will be an election before. So I just want that to be clear, that this will not immediately impact the salaries. It will start at the beginning of the next term.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volke, District 3. Mr. Barron, do we have any statistics on how the workload of the Orphans Court has changed over the last 4 years, or what the workload of the Orphans Court is on a regular basis that would suggest that this is necessary because somehow they're hearing more cases?
So actually, I think we did see a slight dip during the pandemic. We were provided some data. I'm happy to share that with you. The caseload is, let's see if I was smart enough to put it in my notes, but it is significant as it relates to some of our neighboring counties. The more rural counties will see very few cases. Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, Prince George's. Montgomery County actually doesn't have an orphans court judge system. The circuit court judges do it. So there's a significant, in a county this large, there's a significant workload. So I can provide you with those numbers. I do not see, it was in my notes, so.
May I?
Go ahead, Mr. Volke.
Thank you. Anecdotally, I would expect that their caseload was down because it was down for the entire circuit court because they were closed for the better part of 18 months.
Correct.
And having tried orphans court cases in Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County, not in the other jurisdictions, but in those two, I am familiar with the orphans court and how they work, and I know that it's significantly different how those courts operate than the circuit court. From personal experience, I can speak to that. So that being said, I guess in terms of the workload and the volume, I understand circuit court judges are there 5 days a week. They're typically working, they're on the bench normally from 9 until 12 and then 1:30 to 4:30. I understand the orphans court meets 3 days a week, and I think that they meet somewhere around 4 or 5 hours each of those days. Do we have any stats on what their additional workload is beyond that time?
I think that's dependent on the individual judge, and I think, if I recall from the budget discussion, there was discussion about a lot of them do take their work home
And
Yeah.
there is a significant level of work outside of just hearing the case and reviewing the documents before, reviewing the case before.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barron, before we go on, for folks who might be watching this meeting from home, who are like I was before I understood what the Orphans Court actually does, would you mind just giving a brief overview of what is the Orphans Court and how it really doesn't have anything to do with orphans the way we think of them?
So I'll do my best. The Orphans Court looks at the estates and adjudicates when a person has passed on their assets, how they get distributed, and looks at that. It's all, the Orphans Court can make a decision, and then it's available for judicial review if it's contested.
Thank you very much.
I don't know how I did. My law school professors might not be happy.
Go ahead, Mr. Volke.
Thanks. The Orphans Court has concurrent jurisdiction with the Circuit Court, right? So the Circuit Court can hear these same cases that the Orphans Court is hearing, is my understanding, which is why places like Montgomery doesn't even have an Orphans Court anymore, because they're just concurrently hearing them.
So I'm going to turn it over to the better lawyer at the end of the table.
Having never practiced in front of the Orphans Court, I'm not quite sure about that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
You might be interested, in fact, anyone might be interested. There's a really good history of the Orphans Court actually on the Maryland Court's website. It's actually called The History of the Orphans Court in Maryland, and it is available on marylandcourts.gov. It's really good. I actually have a long time ago wondered what on earth the Orphans Court does, and it is explained that it actually has, it comes from long ago in England, and it comes from, it says, confusing to the 21st century mind, to the fact that children of deceased male landowners were considered orphans when the father died. They were the persons for whom the, quote, Orphans Court legal system was developed to protect their inheritance interests.
Thank you very much.
And there's more than that.
Oh.
So please find it, and I encourage anybody to read it. It's pretty interesting.
Thank you very much. So that is a little different than my understanding of orphan as in Little Annie. All right. Let's see. Oh, my goodness, I've completely lost our place. Have we had the public hearing? No. Okay, then that would be next. We will now open the public hearing on Bill number 60-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything ahead of time.
Thank you. We didn't have anyone sign up ahead of time either, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, you may come up to the table at this time and have a seat. Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 60-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 60-22.
Bill number 6022, an ordinance concerning branches of government, Orphans Court compensation.
Thank you. And Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I just had one other question that came to my head. When we were in the budget hearings, I recall the Orphans Court mentioning, the work sessions on the budget. I recall a discussion about pay, but only, to my recollection, it was kind of one sum that they were looking for. How in this bill did we come up with the numbers and, over the 4 years?
It's a fair question. So I'll ask Ms. Podolsky to correct me if I get any of this wrong. We looked at all the jurisdictions, compared most large jurisdictions provide for a chief judge salary and a associate judge salary. So we compared where we were in line with other jurisdictions, and then phasing it in was just a decision. Generally, we've been phasing in salary increases, so we thought that was appropriate. Did I get that about right? Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Are those other jurisdictions, they all have a similar kind of part-time status, or are any of them full-time status?
I don't know about the full and part-time, but I can give you a quick summary because I do have that in my notes. In Baltimore City, the chief judge is at 85,000 and change. The associate is at 74,000. Baltimore County, the chief is at 75 and the associate is at 70. And then Prince George's County is 55 for the chief judge and 50. And those were the most comparable counties in terms of jurisdictional size.
Okay, thank you. I actually would like to ask one more question, and I hope you know this. If not, maybe someone else does. Do you know the last time before this bill that the salary or the compensation for the orphans court judges had been adjusted in any manner?
At one point I did. Do you know that offhand?
I can help. It was 4 years ago. It just happened.
Yeah.
They went from 29 to 39, I think was the number.
That sounds correct. And as noted earlier, it can't be changed during the term. So we have to do, this is the right time in the calendar to adjust salaries.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, seeing no additional lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 60-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
This is really difficult for me because I just don't understand the whole, how all elected court, not full-time, part-time are paid. It just seems like a pretty large bump, and it's certainly more than our salary. But for now, I will just vote aye, and I'm voting aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Nay.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Nay.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative. Bill number 6022 has been passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 61-22.
Bill number 6122, an ordinance concerning pensions, deferred retirement option program, fire service retirement plan.
Once again, this is an admin bill. Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joining us at the table is Ms. Lovett to join Ms. Badowski from Personnel, and Ms. Blair Kosmeyer sticking with us. 6122 modifies the eligibility requirements for a 6-year of participation in DROP for certain employees in the fire service retirement plan. The bill would require approval from the appointing authority for employees in the classification of fire division chief, fire deputy chief, fire assistant chief, or fire chief to extend the drop into a 6-year. The proposed language is the result of the bargaining process and would not have any fiscal impact as the listed positions are already eligible to extend beyond 5th-year drop participation with appointing authority approval. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Madam Chair?
Oh, go ahead.
Quick question. Is there an upper limit that is contemplated if we were to extend this to the drop participation to 6, that seems reasonable. Sort of like, I'm thinking of like the rainy day fund. You can only increase that percentage so high before it makes no sense. And same thing with drop, and I'm not quite sure what are the factors that we would be considering. But can you just explain more about the operational reasons why this is a good idea and whether you think it's likely we would want to extend beyond 6 years at some point in the future?
I think Personnel is best equipped to tackle that one.
Ann Badowski, Personnel Director. There is no contemplation of extending DROP beyond 6 years at this time. The DROP program itself is 6 years in length, and the bill simply removes the requirement for certain members to no longer have an appointing authority approval for that last year.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no additional lights at this time, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 61-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, there was nothing received ahead of time.
Thank you. And we did not have anyone signed up ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, please come up to the table and have a seat. Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 61-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 61-22.
Bill number 6122, an ordinance concerning pensions, deferred retirement option program, fire service retirement plan.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 61-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 6122 has been passed.
Thank you. At this time, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 62-22.
Bill number 6222, an ordinance concerning crimes, civil offenses and fines, littering, civil fines.
Thank you. And this bill is co-sponsored by Mr. Pruski and Mr. Volkey. You have the floor. And it looks like Mr. Pruski will be speaking.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Mr. Volkey for joining me on this. We've had a lot of conversations. I want to provide a little bit of background first and then explain exactly what the bill does. As many of you know, we hold town halls, we go into communities, and over the past few years, we have a trash problem in Anne Arundel. Particularly if you go into communities where they have open space areas, parks, storm drains, culverts, it continues to pile up. And I just want to give you a few stats that kind of back this up and why we did this bill. Anne Arundel County Police Department issued 366 citations for littering between January 1st, 2018 to 9/30/2021. That's about 8 citations a month. Again, that's March 2022. I'm sure data's been updated since then. Our Department of Public Works actually pays an average of $150,000 a year of your taxpayer dollars to clean up roadways. This bill obviously deals with littering in terms of offense, and obviously we are changing and updating that piece. And the bill raised the fines for roadside littering for $250 for the first offense, $750 for the second offense, and $1,000 for subsequent offenses. Current fines, okay, in the code are $125, $500, and $1,000. Now, why did I come up, obviously, with the numbers? Obviously, looked at other jurisdictions. The Maryland fine is actually under state law is up to $1,500 per violation, but I wanted to stay within the piece. Obviously, changing a fine just doesn't change behavior. I think this county, the county council, and others should follow what the U.S. Forest Service did years ago. Now, this is my age, but some of you may remember Woodsy the Owl. They used to say, give a hoot, don't pollute. And now they've changed it to lend a hand and care for the land. Both of them are the same concept. People need to change their behavior. And there's a couple reasons why. It's an environmental impact. It costs you taxpayer dollars. And I think all of us need to do a better job of letting people know that you can get to a receptacle. So obviously either things are recycled or thrown out. And that's why I'm bringing this bill forward. It's twofold. Obviously to increase the fine, but also that we promote education and common sense and clean up our communities. Because I don't know about you, when I walk in our parks and see people just throw trash, or driving down Route 3 the other day and somebody throws their Chick-fil-A bag out the window, that's going to end up in your culvert, it's going to end up in somebody's yard, and it doesn't help anybody. And I think it's about time, obviously, we have that discussion again. And of course, that's the motivation for this bill, and I hope I can get everyone's support. Thank you.
Mr. Volkey.
Ms. Pickard was first.
Oh, okay. I figured as the co-sponsor, but Ms. Pickard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, District 2. First, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor to this bill, but I want to thank both the sponsors for bringing it forward. I've spent considerable time with high school students, and this is one of the main issues that they have talked to me about as a concern they have in their community. I also, interestingly enough, have adult constituents that reach out and want to know why the county isn't doing more to clean up our roads. Well, let me tell you something. DPW has spent a lot of time over the last 2 years doing just that, cleaning up the trash thrown by residents of this county and people who travel our roads. That, to me, is a disgrace. While I certainly want to keep our county clean, it is not necessarily the role of county government to do that. It is the responsibility of all citizens and all residents. And I find it quite interesting that the young people in this community get it. And I concur with Mr. Pruski on effort to elevate the Keep America Beautiful, Keep Anne Arundel County Beautiful, lend a hand, care about your own community, and hold your neighbors accountable when they're throwing trash in the street, because it is disgusting. Thank you.
Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm channeling my inner council members gone by. I won't name any, but I'll just say this. Don't be a dirtball, right? I mean, that's the most important thing. Like, in all honesty, stop wasting my tax dollars having DPW have to go out there and pick up your trash. That's irritating. I led the charge on this last year with 1921, that bill that made it a crime, and I appreciate Councilman Pruski sort of coming with this and saying, let's take the fines up. And he brought it to my attention. I said, absolutely, because I don't support a lot of things with government fining people, and I get worried about that. But on this one, this is so simple, right? This is completely and 100% within your control. Stop littering. Don't be a dirtball. Don't call it the Don't Be a Dirtball bill.
I mean, if we only had actual names for all of our bills, I think that would be great. Mr. Barron, you haven't had a chance to weigh in yet, so let's get the admin's perspective here, and your team if they like.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have Major Passman and Ms. Blair Klassmeyer with me. The administration doesn't have a position on the name. We are fully supportive of this bill. I do want to note that, you know, it's our men and women in law enforcement, and it's our men and women in DPW that are dealing with this every day. There is one thing and I appreciate Councilman Pruski, you bringing this bill forward, but also you mentioning the number of citations our officers issue. While the bill, 1921, I think it was, Mr. Volkey, hasn't been used a lot. There are a lot of situations where we have a couple of tools in our toolbox. This is one additional tool for us to use to counter this. But as everybody has said, this is a matter of personal responsibility. If you've got trash, get a bag, put it in it, and put it in a trash can. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually have a question maybe for Mr. Passman, but I'll let you guys decide. I'm just curious what a typical, sort of enforcement step looks like. Is this something that's handled often as a traffic stop, or maybe if a officer were, out on foot and they'd see someone just throw something, or really could be any of the above, or is it typically more one way than the other?
I think typically, Major Pass with the Anne Arundel County Police, typically it's going to be an officer in their car watching somebody throw it out the window. That's the typical way. As Mr. Barron said, there's a bunch of different approaches. There's traffic citations. There's the civil citation involving this particular bill and law, and there's also criminal offenses. So, all different ways. But mostly, it's going to be the officers driving, since they're mostly in their car, and that's their office.
Okay, thank you. And I'd just like to ask one follow-up question. Are the folks that that you're giving these citations to, are they at least embarrassed that they were throwing out garbage out their window or whatever?
It's been several years since I've written a citation for it, but they were embarrassed.
Okay. Well, that's so at least they know better.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for humoring my questions. All right. At this time.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Another late filed question. Will this, do we have any separate, enforcement mechanisms for people who allow trash to be sort of like blown about around their property? Like they don't cover their trash cans, and so they cause littering as well. It's not mobile littering necessarily, but home-based littering. And in some of the neighborhoods in my district, when I go through, even though they have frequent trash pickup, it's kind of like a wind tunnel through the neighborhood. So anything that's left out becomes trash. So is there a way to relate this bill to helping neighborhoods clean up and change their behavior? Or do we need a separate bill for something like that?
I'm going to send it down to the other end of the table to
Sure.
Ms. Blair Klassmeyer.
Lori Blair Klassmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. Ms. Kenny is here, who's really the expert on this, but yes, that's a separate zoning type violation for junk and debris and trash. And there's also, I believe, a health citation for uncovered trash that can result in vermin and that sort of thing. So that is handled through the code enforcement type actions that we do. And they would be probably a Class D violation. She is my expert.
Okay, so we would need a separate bill to change whether it was a Class D civil offense, basically.
Or to change
because
the
I'm
fines, yes.
Plenty familiar with zoning enforcement and the health department approaches, but sometimes they're just, they're overwhelmed or they're at capacity. They can't address this nimbly, but maybe there's, another approach. Okay, thank you.
All right. At this time, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 62-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, there was nothing received ahead of time.
Thank you. And we did not have anyone sign up ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak on this bill, you may come on down right now. And seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 62-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 62-22.
Bill number 6222, an ordinance concerning crimes, civil offenses, and fines, littering, civil fines.
Thank you. And seeing no additional lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 62-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Prusky.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 6222 has been passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 63-22.
Bill number 6322, an ordinance concerning zoning, bulk regulations, adult independent dwelling units.
And Ms. Lacy, this is your bill. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill, let me first define a couple of quick terms. AIDU, Adult Independent Dwelling Unit, refers to dwelling units that are for folks who are 55 plus. They don't have kids in our schools, and so these units, as we've talked about in previous bills, don't have an impact on our adequate public facilities for schools requirements. So our existing code couples the idea of AIDUs with another term, ALFs, ALFs. They like lots of acronyms, assisted living facilities, and says these AIDUs need to be built in conjunction with assisted living facilities. So one of the things that we've been trying to tackle is the past few years is not only affordable housing, but specifically how do we help advance generational turnover in neighborhoods where there are folks who their kids have grown. They maybe want to stay in the county, but they don't need the big house and the big yard anymore. And we have a shortage of housing that is attractive to them, housing that would be, have low or no maintenance requirements as far as the landscaping, for example, that could be a part of a community and isn't necessarily attached to an assisted living facility, either because the potential owner occupant of this kind of unit is just not interested in that service, or because the requirement that it be built with an assisted living facility means that, first of all, functionally, those units are not being built nearly as fast enough as needed in the county. But secondly, just because they may want to live near a particular part of the county that doesn't have those facilities available. So Bill 6322 is intended to decouple ALFs and AIDUs, break it open a little bit while taking a bit of advantage of existing, where we have existing wastewater sewer facilities to allow a slight density bump for builders coming into these project areas, but to also expand the geographic locations where they can be built, so that there's this idea of the radius, again, that concept that we've used before, but around libraries and community centers, because those are located across the county, and this would give the potential owners and occupants of these units greater choice in where to live in the county. It would make them more attractive as well. Nothing in the bill says anything about changing anything like setbacks or any of those kinds of requirements. And all of the other the requirements that AIDUs would normally need to meet as far as adequate transportation facilities, all of that, still the same. Nothing is accepted. So with that, I hope you'll support the bill.
Thank you. And Mr. Barron, you may respond on behalf of the administration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have our expert, Ms. Lori Rose, our Deputy CAO for Land Use, Ms. Lynn Miller from OPZ, and Ms. Kelly Kenny from the Office of Law. First, the sponsor and the administration have had extensive discussions on this issue, and I think we all firmly agree on the policy goal here. And I think Ms. Lacey described it very well. I think there's a real need for our senior residents to have housing that is practical and affordable for their needs. We might, and we've had long discussions about this, we might not have taken this approach with this bill, but at the end, the policy goal here is what's important. And so we are happy to support the bill. The additional flexibility for AIDUs is going to hopefully provide some opportunity to keep people in the county as they age. We do understand there's an amendment coming and look forward to supporting that at the appropriate time, as well as if the council has any questions, we're happy to do our best to answer them.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'm sorry, Ms. Pickard, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, District 2. I was part of a private sector stakeholder group that coordinated with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Dan Parolek, who's coined the phrase the missing middle housing and is a champion across the country of housing choice. While his concepts and housing choice aren't totally tailored to the active adult, it is a part of our housing choice in Anne Arundel County and our housing policy, and therefore our code, our land use code, that is in desperate need of modernization, not just to provide AIDUs, but also housing choice across the housing market. So I support this bill. I did have a role in its development in the early stages. I hope we can pass this and continue to talk about housing choice. And if you haven't taken the time to understand the concept of the missing middle, I highly recommend you do, and I may or may not have 7 books in my office for anybody who would like to borrow one. But the concept is quite interesting, and it does take the conversation of housing choice for all family structures, for all ages, for all price points, for all types. We have gotten away from everything from a quadruplex to a duplex to a courtyard setting of like the 1930s and 40s and moved towards our car-centric, 1 acre, 1 house, large house, and we have made our communities less acceptable, less accessible, less sustainable, and less walkable, and also less attainable and affordable. So that's a lot to take in, but this is one small step and one small tweak to our code that brings in that housing choice and accommodates families of different types. So thanks.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 63-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
Madam Chair, we did not receive anything ahead of time.
Excuse me. I did was send something in.
Are you?
Would you like to
Actually, she's registered for the public hearing.
Oh, so okay. Are you registered to speak in the public hearing? We're just about to get to that. So we have two separate pieces. The piece where folks, but no, you're all the way here. Come on down. I'm about to get to you. So we'll open up. And are you Helene Raven? All right, very good. So at this time, we'll invite members of the audience who have signed up, and that would be you. So your timing was perfect. When you're ready, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Thank you. And I'm here as a private citizen. I live on Lee Drive, and I've lived there for a very long time. B63-22 increases density for areas that have sewer. We do have sewer provided in our area and all down for the Forest Drive corridor. We also have at this time some different areas that have not really been developed. And I believe it's time, with looking at this bill, the density that's increased in it is substantial. For example, if you have 1 acre and have the sewer, that you can now have 3 dwellings per acre. According to R2, it goes from 2.5 dwelling units per acre to 5. That's a lot. R5 goes from 5 dwelling acres to 6. 5 dwelling units per acre will now be with the changed bill. My concern with all of this is that we have substantial traffic on the Forest Drive corridor. There was a study that was performed, it was called the Eastport, it was a study that was called, it was the March 2019 report of the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study Task Force, and that was performed by the City Council. And they brought out some of the issues with this, and we're looking for some kind of cooperation between the city and the county in working with that corridor. In that report, they noted a county transportation plan of 2019 that identified the Forest Drive corridor as a safety focus area because of high rates of accidents, including pedestrians and bicycles. Now, one of my concerns with all of this is I don't know how well this change works with Plan 2040. I don't know. I don't know if it's incorporated or how that works. I think that this personally is a very good idea for some parts of the county, but not all. And this type of change needs to be addressed locally, not globally. So,
thank you very much. If there's anyone else who would like to come on, you may come on down. State your name and address for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Aileen Talley. I live at 1018 Mast Line Drive in Heritage Harbor. But I lived many, many years in Hillsmere on Forest Drive and spent nearly all of those years trying to control development on Forest Drive because it's a single road, no options for another one, and it serves half of the city of Annapolis and the entire Annapolis Neck Peninsula as the only road away from the bay should there be any kind of flood, disaster, or anything else. As it is, a minor traffic accident stops things for a couple of hours. But my question here is this. I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea, the concept. However, it runs into a problem with zoning, I believe, in that you can't apply it individually. Once you increase the amount of dwellings allowed per acre, anybody can use it, not just people wanting to build these wonderful special homes. And our experience along Forest Drive, because it's an extremely attractive area to build in, is that once there's a crack in the door, all of a sudden you don't have housing for special people. You have housing for anybody who will buy it at an inflated price. So my question is this. If you increase the density in these areas countywide, is there any way that you could include this use as a special exception so that you can limit the privilege to the people who want to use it the way you've designed it to be used, rather than have it simply snapped up by anybody who wants to build more houses on the same piece of land? So that's my concern, and that's my suggestion, if you could possibly do this. I don't think I'm crazy on this one because, quite frankly, I've been through these wars for years and years and years. In fact, I chaired the first Adequate Facilities Committee in this county back in the late 70s. So this isn't a new problem. It is that, are you required to create a zoning category across the board, or can you limit a special use of that property to a specific special use? Which
Thank you. I need you to conclude your remarks.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. All right. At this time, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no movement except members of the administration, the public hearing on Bill number 63-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 63-22.
Bill number 6322, an ordinance concerning zoning, bulk regulations, adult independent dwelling units.
Thank you. There is one amendment. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Excuse me. Amendment number 1. This amendment makes a correction to the purpose paragraph.
And this is an admin amendment. Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, actually, it's mine.
My apologies.
It's if anything,
Go ahead, Ms. Lacey.
If anything, it's an Office of Law amendment because I was told the bill wouldn't work without fixing this typo. But the only thing I really have to say about it is I'm not entirely sure if this is a technical or a substantive amendment, and whatever they say, I think dictates whatever we do tonight.
I can give the floor to Office of Law if they'd like to try and answer Ms.
Well,
Lacey's.
first, I guess I move my amendment. So.
And I will second it. And Office of Law, would you be willing to tackle that question? Substantive
Sure, Kelly
or
Kennedy,
technical?
Supervising County Attorney. And I didn't draft the amendment. I believe Ms. Blair Klassmeyer drafted it. And if it were technical, I think it would say that it was technical. I think it may go a bit beyond technical, but it does just make a minor correction to the purpose paragraph and nothing else. I'm going to turn to Lori and see if did you consider that question before? Usually we'll say it's technical if it is.
I'm sorry. Lori Blair, Klassmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. I did not draft it. I reviewed it. But that's okay. I believe it is technical.
All right, thank you very much.
Did I do anything else?
Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Longstanding position of the administration to be opposed to errors.
All right. It's always a good position. Seeing no other lights with questions or comments on this technical amendment, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 has been adopted.
All right, so if it has been adopted, but it is a technical amendment, we may continue our discussion and vote on this bill, amended bill, this evening. Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I just wanted to ask a question following up from some of the testimony. I had reached out earlier asking if this was technical or substantive, and so I'm going to try and get my thoughts together because the answer I got earlier was that this was a substantive amendment. But so I'm trying to understand on the special exception that was just referenced, is there a reason why it doesn't need to be special exception so that we can make sure that it's used for the purpose that it is? For anyone who's listening, let me back up. one of the women who just testified mentioned, could you consider making this a special exception? And so my question, maybe it's for the sponsor, maybe it's for planning and zoning, but just if that's not necessary, how come? So that anyone who's listening understands, why that might not be something we have to do.
Ms. Lacy?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
I guess
Ms. Lacy.
the first stab I would make at it, I really shouldn't say anything before Lori Rhodes does, but but I think the main reason is because the requirements for it are already here within the R1, R2, and R5 charts. But Ms. Rhodes, I pass the baton.
Thank you. Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Land Use. Like Councilwoman Lacy explains, this bill decouples what's already in the code. The code allows adult independent dwelling units under the category of an assisted living facility, and there's no proportionality between the principal category of assisted versus the adult independent dwelling units, meaning that the density currently in the code, if you were to construct an assisted living facility, you would be allowed by special exception to have maximum density of 1 unit per net acre in RLD, 3 per net acre in R1, 6 per net acre in R2, and 8 per net acre in R5. So, and you would need to have a minimum lot size of 10 acres. So having that amount of land area where you're only allowed to, well, you can build a small assisted living facility drives up the cost of the housing. So the decoupling, as explained by Councilwoman Lacy and Pickard, this attempts to take that concept of missing middle as a step in the right direction in terms of affordability, because we are having issues in the county with housing choice. And so that's how I would explain it. Already allowed by special exception, but you would have to build an assisted living facility to get the density that this bill provides without the special exception. Did I answer your question?
A++++.
Did that answer your question?
I think so, but then this does not require a special exception for
This does
these
not
units.
require a special exception. So with the special exception, you would be able to have the density that this bill provides, but you would have to build an assisted living facility in that development at a certain minimum acreage. So this removes those requirements, this bill.
Okay. And I think Ms. Fiedler was next. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Feather, District 5. So I understand the decoupling aspect of this. I do share concerns having a peninsula in District 5. I mean, we all have peninsulas, I think. What is, or do you know what the traffic yield difference is between the coupled version that we have now and the decoupled version that this bill does?
The traffic yield, Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, a traffic study would be required if the trip count was 50 or higher. And depending on the size of the development, with 10 acres as the minimum, they're going to probably be building houses that are going to exceed that 50 acre. So they're still going to have to file for a traffic impact study to address adequacy of public facilities, whether it's in a bill without a special exception or in a bill with assisted living with the adult independent. You're still going to be required to submit the traffic impact study. And that would be hypothetical for me to guess a number without knowing how many dwelling units would be proposed.
Madam Chair, follow-up question?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Amanda Feather, District 5. So in that frame of thought, I would think, and I know you can't give a definitive answer, affirmative answer, I would think that a development that includes an assisted living facility, there's some component of it, of those residents that are not going to be driving vehicles compared to an all-independent dwelling unit that does. Or am I missing something?
Assuming that a developer would file a special exception and only build an assisted living facility absent the adult independent dwelling units. And I've not seen that happen with this type of use. They, 100% of the time, they are proposing adult independent dwelling units in the development with the assisted living facility.
Thank you. Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, District 2. I think some of the interesting provisions in this bill that also speak to, we can speak to the intensity of the development itself. When you have an assisted living facility, as someone who worked in senior housing, while they might not have residents that drive, they have staff, they have medical transportation, they have other aspects to what makes an assisted living facility an assisted living facility. So it also, the decoupling of it and then decreasing the allowed density, we're now de-intensifying a community of active adult. Am I saying that correct, Ms. Rhodes? As we watch our population age and move through time, we are seeing people retire and they have nowhere to go because we are not building purpose-built, age-in-place kind of housing in Anne Arundel County. So people are either leaving. This bill attempts to address a market need as well as a housing choice issue and a better use of our land use code, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm helping clarify or I'm confusing the issue. But if you're going to have a big assisted living facility and more AIDUs per acre with the way the code is written now, this is allowing those housing choices to be built and communities to be built of a different type and a different density that gets at a real need that we have in the market and in our community.
I just want to jump in with a question here for either Ms. Rhodes or the sponsor. Just a clarification on the bill. I don't know why I didn't ask or see this question before when I was reviewing this bill, but is the 10-acre minimum still in play? So in order to access the density bonus, I guess if we'll call it that, you still must be starting with a minimum 10-acre.
No, it's not in play. Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. It's not in play with this bill. It would be in play under the current provisions under assisted living facility if it was on a lot zoned RLD or in R1 and R2. The facility shall be located on a lot of at least 10 acres. And then if it's located on a collector road, the acreage can be reduced to a minimum of 5.
Okay, so regardless, there still is an acreage minimum. I mean, it's either 5 or 10 depending on other variables.
Only under the assisted living provisions in the code, but not under this bill.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I'm sorry, I was misunderstanding that. Ms. Hare, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I'm glad, Councilwoman Rabia, that you asked that question because I had the same curious thought. So then I guess then my question is going back to, I think, the sponsor. We are taking away the minimum acreage, and I understand we're decoupling. I like the decoupling piece of it. But we are decoupling, and we're taking away the minimum acreage, but giving the same density allowance as the prior bill for the AIDU portion, if I understand Ms. Rhodes correctly.
Go ahead.
Is that correct? It's the same, the AIDU portion is the same in this bill is the same density as if they were built with the assisted living. It's just that the assisted living piece is gone.
It's almost the same. Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. RLD is not mentioned in this bill. R1, the 3 dwelling units would be the same density under the special exception. Under this bill, it would be 3 if it's R1. R2, it's reduced from 6, which the special exception would allow, to 5 under this bill. And then in R5, it goes from 8 which is allowed by special exception to 6 in this bill. So it's not exactly the same density, just slightly less in R2 and in R5 districts.
Okay. So I do get hung up a little bit on the density bonus piece of it. Did you consider in drafting keeping it still special exception, but having the decoupling provisions?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Ms. Harrod, no, I did not consider that at all, because with the idea of the decoupling, a big part of it is to try to, look for ways that we can get this housing built without doing a special exception. I actually think that the assisted living facility piece is the piece that drives special exception more than the AIDU piece does. So that's why here, essentially, you've got, on the one hand, when you read the bill straight down, top to bottom, it's like a small density bonus for these particular AIDUs decoupled from the assisted living facilities. But when, as Ms. Rhodes said, the density is lower than would be allowed if you were coupled with an ALF.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I hope I'm not about to complicate things. So if this bill were to pass, could you, as a developer, have a cluster bill that you use this AIDU allowance and thereby allowing higher density in a cluster development?
Lynn Miller, Planning and Zoning, and the answer is yes.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask a question that might address the concerns of my constituents who came here to testify this evening. There's no aspect of this that changes the requirement of meeting the APF tests.
Correct.
Okay, so adequate roads, obviously schools are not going to be in play when you're talking about AIDUs, but, and traffic study would be, if you got to a certain size, you would be required to have a traffic study and meet the APF tests.
That is correct. Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. This is a zoning bill. They would still be subject to Article 17, which is the development code that it has the adequacy of public facilities within it.
Thank you. And I'll just speak a little bit more on my understanding of how this could impact the Annapolis Neck, because I did have a number of folks reach out to me about that, that the number of, that there are few, if any, parcels that are big enough to make this a feasible type of development on the Annapolis Neck. This is something, just the nature of it is not likely, maybe even impossible to result in AIDU developments along the Annapolis Neck, because so much is already either already built out, or it's more profitable to build it in the way that it's that it's actually zoned.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I think that is why I would agree with Ms. Pickard's statement. This is a small bill. It can't reach every area of the county. It's not going to be feasible in every area of the county. But a big part of the point is to help facilitate the market finding the areas where it will be a good fit, and then get that housing built.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So I can entirely appreciate the goal here. I agree that we have a challenge facing our seniors, our aging seniors in the county, with finding smaller housing that's more conducive to that time in life. I do have concerns over the cluster overlay and how that interacts, because cluster development has been an issue within District 5 that I've been trying to work on. I'd like to find a solution to this. So at this time, I'm going to motion to hold the bill until our meeting on July 18th.
Madam Chair, we ran into this complication before. You have an amended bill. So Yeah, so I would just suggest that
Okay.
it complicates issues, and I can explain it if you would like me to, but it complicates issues for the public and people following, because they don't
Okay.
understand why there's an amended bill, but you held the vote. So I would just keep it simple, and perhaps allow the amended bill to come back as though it was amended in substance.
Would that be an acceptable solution to the maker of the current motion?
That will, and please understand that the reason I made the motion was understanding we had a technical amendment before us. I assumed we were going to a vote this evening. I am completely fine with that, so I withdraw the motion.
And Ms. Lacy, go ahead.
Okay, hang on a second. Madam Chair, I was just going to say, I would just second your motion. It can come back. It didn't have to, but now with your motion, it will. And so we can still have it on the 18th.
But I can also just make the decision that we'll bring it back on the 18th. Is that correct?
Yes, it's simpler and cleaner to just allow this to be an amended bill that comes back at the next meeting. It's a regular process that we follow, we're very used to, and the public very well understands it.
All right.
Correct. So I'm sorry, Madam Chair, it's late, and all I
Yep.
was trying to say is that's fine.
I think we're all trying to get to the same goal, but we just want to make sure that we follow the technical processes properly. So with that, Bill number 63-22 as amended will be heard on Monday, July 18th, 2022. All right, moving on. Oh my goodness, we do have a full agenda tonight, but we've made it to the resolution part of our meeting. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 18-22.
Resolution number 1822, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to allow a council member to serve up to 3 consecutive terms of office.
Mr. Volke, this is your resolution. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there were about 16 different topics that we as a council asked the Charter Revision Commission to review to determine whether they made sense to amend our charter on certain points. One of them was this particular point. This has come in front of the council before. Prior councils have reviewed this and not gone forward with this, but the Charter Revision Commission did review this, and in their final report, they did note that this was actually a concept or a change to the charter that they would support. So with that, I have brought this forward and am putting this in front of the council for consideration. Obviously, if the council passes it, that does not make it so. It still has to go to the voters in November, and they will ultimately decide whether or not that is something that is available to have council members serve more than 2 terms currently, which we are limited to. As the Charter Revision Commission noted, they did take a look at the term limitations that existed in surrounding jurisdictions of comparable size, and also noted that many of them allow 3 terms. I think the only other jurisdiction that maxes council members at 2 terms is Prince George's County, and there were some that did not have any term limits whatsoever. So with that, this is something that the Charter Revision Commission recommended, so for that reason I have put it forward for discussion and consideration by the council, and I look forward to everyone's consideration on this.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the council? Any comments? Go ahead, Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So certainly there is a recommendation by the Charter Review Commission. We can all have our personal opinion. One concern that I have, though, and it's something that we've talked about in relationship to pensions for council members. As you know, there's a limit, and as this, if goes to effect, would impact that. And I personally think it should be addressed along with it. Now, there is no bill that came that, but I raised that question of concern because as you have 3 terms, then you go over that limit, and that's not really addressed again. And whether it's the Charter Review Commission or anything else, I just wanted to point that out, that is something that hopefully, if this does pass or whatever happens, that does get addressed, because it should be.
Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? I'll just chime in and say that I'm comfortable with letting the voters make the call on this. This just puts it to the voters and say, hey, do you like the idea of allowing your council members to serve a 3rd term? Or do you like the things the way it is and not, keep it at 2? So I feel like it's fair to let the voters decide. So I will support this amendment. And we will now open the public hearing on resolution number 18-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything through the online testimony tool ahead of time.
Thank you. We didn't have anyone who signed up to testify in person, but if there is anyone who wishes to speak, you may come up to the table and have a seat. Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on resolution number 18-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 18-22.
Resolution number 1822, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to allow a council member to serve up to 3 consecutive terms of office.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 18-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Resolution number 1822 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 19-22.
Resolution number 1922, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to require that the compensation paid to each member of the County Council be in accordance with the recommendations of the Salary Standard Commission that are approved by ordinance of the County Council.
Thank you. And this is Mr. Pruski and Ms. Lacy's resolution. Mr. Pruski, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think for the next resolution, it's better to give an introduction and then just give the body and get right to the point. We obviously had the Charter Review Commission that provided the recommendations, as was stated earlier. One of the things that's been unclear in the charter is how the process works, or at least the language of the recommendations of the Standard Salary Commission. And again, this doesn't change the amount, doesn't change whatever else, it's just a legal cleanup. Essentially removes outdated reference to council salaries and state that council salary for the council be consistent with the recommendations of the Salary Standard Commission as adopted by the council. Again, this language was brought forward by that Salary Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is going to be an Office of Law question, so probably need Ms. Blair Klausmeyer.
Oh, she's on standby and ready to roll. Oh, I don't think we're close.
So I heard what Mr. Pruski said, that this doesn't change the actual compensation, and I understand that. I guess the question I have is, if it says in here in the charter now that our compensation has to be in accordance with the Salary Standard Commission, but then it has this reference to an ordinance that the council has to pass, then how's the interplay there, right? How is it in terms of the council obviously gets an ordinance, but what if we were to say we don't want to do what the Salary Standard Commission says? Then are we violating the charter by not doing something in accordance with what they've said? I think there's a couple references in here that seem conflicting to me. I'm fine with taking out that we're not getting $2,100 a year because that is outdated in consideration for what we're doing. But I want to make sure that we still have to have the ordinance come in front of the council to pass it. And I want to ensure that if the council gets a recommendation from the Salary Standard Commission, that it doesn't somehow become binding or create some sort of requirement that the council has to do what they tell us to do. So I don't know if you can speak to that. Maybe, I hope I've made clear my concern.
Yeah, so Lori Blair Klausmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. So the intent here, obviously, is to get rid of the old reference, and you want something there. So the procedure for setting the salary is you take the report of the Salary Standard Commission, and then an ordinance comes out of that for the salary. So it's not intended to be that suddenly the Salary Standard Commission report becomes binding. It is to really reference that process that is already legislated and to fill in the gap that's left when you remove the outdated salary reference. So I think the notion is it's the recommendations that are approved through an ordinance. So that's the intent.
Go ahead, Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think the struggle that I have are the two words in accordance. Right, where it says in accordance, I would be fine if it said considering the recommendations or something like that, but it's the in accordance that seems to be the binding language to me there. So as long as you say to me from a legal perspective that is not going to be something that binds future councils, and we have that in the record, then at that point, I probably can get over my concerns with the language. But that's my worry, is those in accordance, it seems to be binding in that nature.
It still requires that any recommendations be approved by ordinance. So I'm comfortable that that is not binding.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I guess this is a question for Office of Law. Do we have time within the time constraints that we're working with to change that in accordance to say something more like considering or not to exceed the recommendations of the Salary Standard Commission? Because I do think this is ambiguous. I read this as binding, and I am concerned that even the conversation we have tonight, and even if you say it's not, that future councils will end up debating this issue, and it will become a problem.
Ms. Corby is my timekeeper, my calendar keeper, and she's nodding her head that we have time. So, because I believe there was one introduced tonight that won't be taken up till the 18th, correct? So I think we're good.
Yeah, it's also a resolution, so isn't it fair to say that, I mean, we could do an amendment tonight and still vote on it if you knew exactly what you wanted to do? Sometimes we do craft amendments on the fly, but you could also wait and do it on the 18th. You could also amend it and vote on it the same night. It's up to it's really on the county attorney. That's who we're trying to be the most kind to at this point in time, because he has a statutory deadline for certifying these questions, and it is in August.
Okay, with that, I think then I would move to hold this until the July 18th meeting so we could work out a couple of words that would change, amended on July 18th and vote on it on July 18th. If that's the motion, to hold the vote on this until July 18th.
I'd like to get behind this, but share the same concern, so I'll second the motion.
As a point of order, is this a debatable motion?
So I do want to point out that, have we held the public hearing?
We have not.
Okay. So probably, since we advertise this as having a public hearing, we should do that first, and then we should have the motion, and then you can ask me to call the roll on the motion. That, I think, makes the most sense.
Does the motion need to be withdrawn and then made again after the public hearing?
Ms. Blair,
We had a motion and a second.
There's a motion and a second on the table. I do think that you cannot move forward with the public hearing until you, just for clarity.
Thank you.
I'll withdraw the second.
Thank you very much. All right, then let's go ahead and move forward with.
And I'm glad you're getting parliamentary counsel.
This is not my jam. I'm glad there's others that are expert on this.
Very dusty.
All right. We will now open the public hearing on resolution number 18-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we did not have anyone signed up ahead of time to testify on this resolution, but if there is anyone who would like to testify, you may come on down. All right, seeing no motion in the audience, the public hearing on resolution number 18-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 18-22.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I thought we were on resolution number 1922.
Oh, good heavens. Yes.
Yeah, that was 19.
I'm getting tired. Yes, 1922.
Resolution number 1922, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to require that the compensation paid to each member of the County Council be in accordance with recommendations of the Salary Standard Commission that are approved by ordinance of the County Council.
Thank you. And before we go on to this, to the motion in the second that I understand are coming, I just have a question of clarification. And I apologize if this is mentioned in the resolution. Who actually would bring the, bill? Who would be the?
The ordinance is brought by the County Council because the Salary Standard Commission reports back to the County Council. The executive branch does not.
So it's like as the whole or as the chair? Oh, maybe.
So Madam Chair, I brought forward, introduced the bill regarding the salary, so a council member has to bring it forward. And if there's no action, it remains the same. So they make a recommendation, we have to take action as the fiscal authority. And so that's what I did. I brought that bill forward on the compensation.
And there are years when there is no
That's correct. There's no
legislation to
action.
change it. Yes.
Okay, so it's not obligatory that the council must bring the bill that is, okay, thank
That's
you so
correct.
much for clarifying that. That was my question. And Mr. Volkey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would make a motion to postpone to a certain time the consideration of Resolution 19-22, with the motion being that the certain time be the last item on the agenda this evening, so that we have time to prepare an amendment.
Is there a second?
Second, Fiedler.
It's a debatable motion, by the way.
Thank you. That was the question on my mind.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Lacy.
I'd like to weigh in as the co-sponsor of this particular resolution. The Salary Standard Commission is able to propose anything from $0 to $1 million if they wanted for each council member. And nothing that they say is going to take effect unless a council member proposes a bill and it's introduced and we debate it and then it gets voted on. And even then, it's only changing the salary for the next folks and not for the people on the current term. So the principle, I think, that is in our current charter is retained with this resolution. It's modernizing that, $2,100 sum, but that doesn't mean the Salary Standard Commission couldn't put that in a report and recommend that as being the appropriate sum for a council member. And we appoint all the members of the Salary Standard Commission anyway. So I'm having trouble perceiving of an amendment that would further clarify without accidentally limiting in a way that isn't the intent. And I actually would prefer that someone consider whether you might like to bring a separate resolution with the wording that you like, and we just vote on this resolution as it is. That's my $2,100.
I'd like to jump in with another question for our Deputy County Attorney. Then, based on what we've discussed at this point, that it would not be obligatory for any member of the council to bring a resolution upon the recommendation of the Salary Commission. Does this resolution actually do anything?
Yes, because the salary is always somehow related to some recommendation of a Salary Standard Commission at some point. It may not be the most recent Salary Standard Commission, but it is a salary standard. It's the only way that the compensation gets set is based on some legislation arising out of a salary standard report.
How is that different than our current process?
It's not. That is the current process. The issue is just to put something in there instead of the $2,100, wasn't it? $2,100.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. You have
Okay.
I'm filling in the gap. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, Ms. Hare.
Oh, I'm happy to vote on the motion.
Oh, that's right. We have a
I had
motion
said July 18th
here.
earlier just to give folks time, but if we can prep an amendment for tonight, that's great by me. So I was just waiting to vote.
All right. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll on Mr. Volkey's amendment? And if Mr. Volkey, would you mind, motion, would you mind restating your motion?
Certainly. It's a motion to postpone to a certain time, and the motion would be to move this resolution to the end of the agenda. So we would still have a vote on it this evening, we would just move it to the end of the agenda. It would be the last thing we consider tonight. That's the motion.
Thank you. And we had a second, correct? All right. Madam Secretary, could you please?
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Ms. Fiedler.
Ms. Fiedler, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the roll. Sorry,
Thank you.
I'm getting a little bit ahead of you.
Nope, you're perfect.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Nay.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. The motion to postpone action on resolution number 1922 to the end of the meeting has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution Number 21-22.
My computer is saying it's tired. I apologize. Resolution number 2122, charter resolution proposing an amendment to the charter of Anne Arundel County to remove the requirement that copies of bills and notices of public hearings be posted on a bulletin board, and to require that electronic copies of bills and notice of any public hearing be published on the County Council website, and printed copies be made available to the public and press.
All right, Mr. Pruski and Ms. Lacey. Mr. Pruski's got the red light on, so you may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm not going to repeat that the Charter Review Commission brought this forward. For the folks who need to be literal, we can walk back to the bulletin board back there so I can show you what it is. I know times have changed, certainly with newspapers and other things, so I hope that this is an easier one. But essentially, this is just an update to remove the requirement that things are posted on the bulletin board outside and really shared online in a timely manner. And I know that staff also has worked with people if they did request a printed copy, from that end. But I think this is just a clarifying language to go with the times. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and have the public hearing on resolution number 21-22. Madam Secretary, do we have testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything ahead of time.
And we also did not have anyone sign up ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to testify, Mr. Barron says he's good, and I'm hearing no, or seeing no movement from the others in the audience. Seeing no movement, the public hearing on resolution number 21-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 21-22.
Resolution number 2122, resolution proposing an amendment to the charter of Anne Arundel County to remove the requirement that copies of bills and notices of public hearings be posted on a bulletin board, and to require that electronic copies of bills and notice of any public hearing be published to the County Council website, and printed copies be made available to the public and press.
And seeing no further lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 21-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Radvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2122 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 22-22.
Resolution number 2222. Resolution proposing an amendment to the charter of Anne Arundel County to clarify the differences between the two types of emergency ordinances allowed under the charter and the legislative procedure that applies to each.
And again, Mr. Pruski, I see your light, and you are the lead sponsor. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you may recall, the Salary Commission brought up instances, especially during COVID and other instances where we passed emergency bills. And Mr. Enright, who many of you know has worked on the Charter Review Commission, thought it would be a great idea to clarify emergency ordinances. So essentially what that does in this resolution is clarify the difference between emergency ordinances the county has authority to pass. In particular, Section 209D shall take effect from the date it becomes law. Then, of course, under subsection 208E, not levying taxes, creating revenue, et cetera. I won't go into that, but it essentially clarifies those emergency ordinances as we described in many of the discussions that we've had throughout this council. And I think this is beneficial language to clarify that for the benefit of the public. Thank you.
All right, seeing no questions from the public, we will now open the public, or from the council, we will now open the public hearing on resolution number 2222. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything ahead of time.
And we didn't have anyone signed up ahead of time. And I'm now confused by Mr. Barron. Are you coming down to testify?
I just want to extend my thanks to Mr. Enright and many members of the council. This has been a sticky issue, and we support this.
Thank you very much. Seeing no additional movement in the audience, the public hearing on resolution number 22-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 22-22.
Resolution number 2222, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to clarify the differences between the two types of emergency ordinances allowed under the Charter and the legislative procedure that applies to each.
Thank you. And seeing no additional lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 22-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2222 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 23-22.
Resolution number 2322, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to allow the County Council to assign additional functions, duties, and personnel to the county auditor that are related to the finances and financial affairs of the county.
Once again, Mr. Pruski, you're the lead sponsor here. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's actually been numerous pieces of legislation since I've been on the council to clarify the auditor's role. In discussions with the Charter Review Commission, they thought it'd be clear to add language in particular. And again, I'm not an attorney, but I play one on TV. I think this is pretty clear, related to the finances and financial affairs of the county, clarifying the county auditor's role, which generally they're doing anyways, but it clarifies that from a legal perspective. So if somebody ever questioned, what is that role? I think that's pretty clear. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Lacy.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, we did have a bill clarifying and strengthening the auditor's role, oversight role. I think that happened after the 2020 election, so this is the first chance to put it before the voters and elevate it to the charter.
Thank you for that additional piece of information. All right. Seeing no lights at this time, we will now open the public hearing on resolution number 23-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Madam Chair.
And we did not have anyone signed up ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, seeing no one, there's no one hiding underneath the chair somewhere? All right, seeing no movement, the public hearing on 23-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of number 23-22.
Resolution number 2322, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to allow the County Council to assign additional functions, duties, and personnel to the county auditor that are related to the finances and financial affairs of the county.
And once again, seeing no further lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 23-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2322 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 24-22.
Resolution number 2422, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to change the name of the Charter Revision Commission to the Redistricting and Charter Revision Commission, and to amend the date by which a decennial Redistricting and Charter Revision Commission must be appointed by the County Council.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Pruski, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we all noted earlier this year when we had redistricting process, there was some concerns, of course. There was also, I guess, debate or questions about the role of the body. And I think to clarify and allow this to be a part of the charter, we would rename the Charter Review Commission to the Redistricting and Charter Review Commission, because essentially that was their role. They had two aspects, which they did a great job on. And again, I think this clarifies that. And of course, something that we can't control regardless of the vote is the census. We just hope that obviously it comes out sooner to allow the public debate and discussion that unfortunately was a little delayed this year, but we all made it through. So hopefully, again, this is clarifying language to help put everything in the record and allow citizens to make this a part of the charter. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no lights from the council, we will now open the public hearing on resolution number 24-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything ahead of time.
Thank you. We did not have anyone signed up ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, and I see once again Mr. Barron at the table, state your name and address for the record. Your remarks are limited to 2 minutes.
I guess I walked up at a little bit late on this one, but Pete Barron with the administration. I do want to express the administration's support for this, and to the Charter Revision Commission did an incredible task. I think I only missed one meeting because I had a conflict. I was at every meeting. They had to work at a breakneck speed under some very tight deadlines and did a very admirable job of digging deep. But I know in conversations with members of the Charter Revision Commission, they kind of wish they had a little more time to dig deeper on a couple of issues. And also, I think the staff that was supporting them would have liked a little bit of breathing room as well, myself included. So just the support this, want to thank the Charter Revision Commission for the work they did, and it's a tough job for no pay. So they deserve our thanks, and if this helps make it a little bit easier for the next group, we should do it.
Thank you very much. Seeing no additional movement in the audience, the public hearing on resolution number 24-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 24-22.
Resolution number 2422, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to change the name of the Charter Revision Commission to the Redistricting and Charter Revision Commission, and to amend the date by which a decennial redistricting and Charter Revision Commission must be appointed by the County Council.
Thank you. Mr. Volke.
Oh, no, I was ready to vote. Sorry.
Oh, that's what I was asking. All right. Seeing no additional lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 24-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2422 has been adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 29-22.
Resolution number 2922, resolution confirming nominations to the Board of Trustees of the Public Library Association of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, Incorporated.
And this is an administration resolution. Mr. Barron, you have the floor. Yes? Library Board appointments?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I got caught sleeping. Thank you. So this is brought forward before you. There are several members who are being reappointed, and there is, I think, 1 or 2 that are being appointed new. Yes, I think it's 2. Faith Steele from Council District 2, and Ishana Gandhi from will be an at-large for their terms. And then we're reappointing several members. I know that the new year has started, the new term for the board members, and I know Mr. Ald and a number of board members are anxious to get the new folks seated and get the terms clarified for our folks who are reappointing. So it's a great group of folks. I think many of you know the great work our libraries do and this board does. So please support this.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the council? All right. We don't have to have a public hearing on this? No. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to roll on the charter resolutions. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 29-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2922 has been adopted.
Thank you. At this time, we will return to resolution number 19-22. And now I'm going blind here. Madam Secretary, would you please read the resolution the title of the resolution?
Sure, yes, Madam Chair. Resolution number 1922, resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to require that the compensation paid to each member of the County Council be in accordance with recommendations of the Salary Standard Commission that are approved by ordinance of the County Council.
Thank you. And we held the public hearing earlier this evening. So at this time, we do have one amendment. And thank you to our staff for pulling this together at light speed. I think by staff, I mean Ms. Schultz. Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Madam Secretary, would you please read amendment number 1?
Amendment number 1, this amendment alters language so that the compensation paid to each member of the County Council is considered based on recommendations of the Salary Standard Commission.
And Mr. Volke, this is your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just following up on the conversation that we had earlier, this would substitute the words "in accordance with" for the words "after consideration of." I believe it maintains the intent of the sponsors on this actual charter resolution, but I'm hopeful that it clarifies that obviously future councils are not bound by what the Salary Standard Commission recommends, that it's something that must be considered by the council in moving forward and setting salaries. So with that, I would ask for my colleagues' second and then favorable consideration.
So is that a motion to adopt this?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And a second?
Fiedler, second.
Thank you. Any additional conversation about this amendment? Mr. Pruski.
I appreciate the sponsor bringing this forward. I mean, I could sleep at night based upon the legal interpretation, but because of bipartisanship and also just trying to clarify, I understand the concern and certainly will support this. I get, why it was brought up, and I respect that. And again, thank you for bringing it forward.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Lacey.
I think my $2,100 meant something, so.
All right. And seeing no additional lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 has been adopted.
All right. Are we allowed to vote on the amended? All right. Thank you. Thank you to the parliamentary experts among us. Is there any further discussion on resolution number 19-22 as amended? I think we are ready to go. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 19-22 as amended.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 1922 as amended has been adopted.
Is there any other business to be brought before the council at this time?
Madam Chair, work
oh,
session.
Yes, I was getting there.
Sorry.
All right, there is a July work session. It is currently scheduled for July 12th at 9 a.m. right here in the chambers. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, so moved. Second.
All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries. We will see you for our work session on July 12th, 2022, when we will meet here at 9 a.m. Our next legislative session will be on July 18th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Have a wonderful night. And keep those folks in South County that got hit by a pretty rough storm this evening in your thoughts.